And it was 1.2 gigahertz signed into law by Ajit Pai, whom I actually consider, and I don't know if you agree, but certainly in this respect, probably the most visionary piece of spectrum legislation in recent history that he managed to give that away.
Ajit Pai is the former FCC commissioner.
Yes, he's the former US FCC.
So this is when he was in.
He was in office.
Was this controversial doing this?
It was actually surprisingly uncontroversial.
So because you'd have thought the operators would have, given what's going on at the moment in 6 gigahertz in other parts of the world, you'd have thought they'd have kicked up a big stink about it.
I know. Isn't it interesting that at the time it was uncontroversial? At least there was very little public talk about we're going to fight this.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that Ajit Pai was the Trump appointee and therefore, by definition, controversial.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hated by a lot of people, especially for the repealing the net neutrality.
Yeah.
So why not controversial, given so much spectrum being given away?
This is a very good question, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. First for 2 weeks. The reason being I'll touch on in a sec. But before we get into that, I'll say I'm delighted that we've got a special guest this week, Claus Hetting, who is the chairman of Wi-Fi Now. So I think, being the very perceptive person that I am, that we're going to talk about Wi-Fi a little bit today.
I expect we will. And first of all, I should say I'm delighted to be here. I've been following you for a long time, Scott, and reading your stuff. And I want to thank you for the great service that you're doing for the industry. Not so much for the Wi-Fi industry, but really I want to, because it's...
And mankind in general.
And as well for mankind.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay, well, that's very kind of you.
Towards the end, we'll discuss the mankind.
That's right. Yes, indeed.
Right?
Indeed. We've already realised in the brief preamble we had before recording that Claus and I have certain views in common.
Correct.
So
I'm not sure how much I should air those views, but I'll do it in sort of a gentle way so I don't scare too many people.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, don't worry. I think people like to be scared.
They've heard worse on here.
Yeah.
Good.
We like to walk a fine line.
All right.
I'll get out of the way the reason we didn't do one last week, and that's because my dad died last Saturday. So what I'd like to do, I'm not going to dwell on it. It's obviously isn't the time and the place.
Yeah.
All right.
Hang on.
Give Pierre a beer.
Sorry.
But I thought we'd have a little drink. Open that up.
What was his name?
Hugh Bicheno. To Hugh Bicheno.
To Hugh.
Clink, clink,
Clink, clink, clink.
clink.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, indeed.
Oh.
So yes, so that's why we were going to have a guest last week, and I won't name them now, but I apologise to that guest, but obviously they understand why. We had to cancel that one. And also, one other segment we're going to talk about once we've sorted out the world of Wi-Fi is a trip that Iain went on with Nokia to northern Finland, which I was going to be on, but I cancelled for that same reason. So I really look forward to hearing about that, because I was looking forward to that trip. Obviously, certain things are more important, but yeah, I look forward to hearing about it. And you did an excellent, comprehensive write-up on it. So there should be plenty to chat about that.
Weren't that many people on that trip at the end of the day,
No.
as it happened. Because I got I was told who they'd invited, which was the two guys that were there. It was me and Michael Carroll from Mobile World Live.
Yeah, know him.
He obviously couldn't make it. And then I think they'd asked Ray, our former boss. But
he couldn't make it.
Well, I talked to Ray, I'm sure, recently about it, and he didn't mention it. So I don't know what happened there, but it sounded like he couldn't make it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also like to have gone just to reward companies for doing proper press strips. It felt like the first, really adventurous, interesting. It was, without meaning to slag off any other press strips I've been on.
No, it was really good.
Yeah.
It was very, well, we can get onto it.
We will.
They were very well sort of looked after, which is always nice. When you're, people do treat journalists well. They're supposed to, aren't they? Because otherwise they're going right nasty things about them. But they were,
Indeed.
there was quite a lot of fun around it.
Good. Well, I mean, sometimes, it sounds incredibly prima donna-ish, but sometimes in the past decade, I've felt that the budget threshold of press trips has gone down a little bit, where we're still looked after, but let's say the hotel's a bit less posh, the meals are a bit less opulent, all that sort of thing.
Unsurprisingly, I guess, right?
Yeah, generally, belts have been tightened, but I feel that spend on PR especially has gone down.
Barometer for the industry?
I mean,
I think so. It's a barometer for my pampered taste.
The wine.
Anyway.
Yeah, and the company we're talking about is obviously, it's not been the greatest year for them, along with their main competitor. So it's nice to see that they still put the effort into doing something like this.
Yeah, good for them. And hopefully I'll, in some small way, make up for not being able to go on it by chatting about it on the pod in a bit. So we're going to talk about that. And then the final segment I think we're going to talk about is the two bits I have written this week have mainly been about US political involvement in their broadband sector, which may overlap with some of Claus's areas of interest and professionally, and as we've already established, overlaps with both our areas of interest politically. So that'll be one of those slightly more tangential, little bit of politics type of thing.
We're not going to go into all the RCS rubbish then.
No, the Apple RCS thing. No, I wasn't that bothered. I mean, for people who don't know,
I was amazed that there was such a big deal made about it. I mean, you've got an Android phone, I've got an iPhone, and I've never sat there thinking, "Oh dear me, texting's got such a hassle, sleepless nights. What am I going to do?"
Well, I think we've got RCS, but we don't even know it.
WhatsApp, don't you, to get around?
We use WhatsApp, but even if you do use text messages, I think there's RCS built into it, and it's not obvious to me how that's massively improved my life.
No.
But I mean,
it sounded like regulation was coming, and it was to sort of nip that in the bud to some extent. The EU's kind of
having a word
about them being a digital gatekeeper, and therefore you sort of have to bare your cheeks.
So they've got to show that they're playing nice a bit more, or more explicitly what you just said. I mean, I understand the messaging I've had from the industry about RCS, which stands for Rich Communications Services.
Or systems, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Which is basically like SMS on steroids that should allow...
high definition pictures and stuff.
Yeah, sending pictures, but also more interactive communication with people via the text channel as opposed to the over-the-top channel.
It was supposed to be the telco's way of kind of regaining some power from the likes of WhatsApp.
Yeah.
But then it got
for 15 years.
I know, at least.
But it sort of got taken over by Google. And now with Apple sort of adopting it as well, it's the tech firms rather than the operators that are behind it. Synchronos sold their RCS stuff, didn't they?
It was a big GSMA initiative, wasn't it?
Always. It was a GSMA initiative originally. Now it's just basically a Google thing.
Right. And now Apple's involved, so they've just gone, all right, GSMA, we'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, as is so often the way.
And the GSMA statement I noticed was about how this will create great new revenue opportunities for telcos.
As they've been saying for 15 years.
And you're thinking, how? I don't get
Let's see it. Well,
it seems the story has not really changed for 15 years. Well, obviously, there's a few new players, but some of the arguments I think are the same, right? Yeah. And it never went anywhere then, so why should it do that now? It's hard to believe. Anyway.
So having said we're not going to talk about it, we just did. So well done. Well done for fucking with my agenda.
We've got a bonus section in. Covered in 5 minutes.
There we go. So that's that. So anyway, whatever I was saying before. Do we have any other bits and bobs to talk about before I just get straight into it? No. Okay. So Claus, you're chairman of Wi-Fi now.
Yes.
Why don't we start? Obviously, we can talk about Wi-Fi in general, and I've got lots of questions. I mean, as I just said to you at the start, I've got to confess that Wi-Fi, while it's ubiquitous and we all rely on it and all that sort of thing, I don't think I write about it very much.
Well, this is really odd, actually, Scott. Sorry.
That's right, don't worry. There's not much leg
Scott, it's actually odd. There are a few publications that write about it in addition to us. Yeah. Not widely and in detail and so on. But I do find it difficult to accept that there are not more publications that write about it. I mean,
maybe that will change for me and Iain after today.
Maybe. I think there's a tremendous amount of activity in the Wi-Fi industry. It's a small industry compared to the mobile industry.
Yeah.
And we have a lot less money than the mobile industry does. On the other hand, we are pretty much everywhere, right? I usually say these days that Wi-Fi is driven by a few things. I think one of the things it's driven by, certainly on the residential side, is a lot of fiber rollout. Right?
Yes.
A lot of fiber rollout. The other thing that it's driven by is really, really excellent and I think exceptional device technology, meaning for phones and laptops and so on. And I think those companies that do the chipset work in both for phones and for whatever terminals and so on do an incredible job.
I think possibly that's one of the reasons why, only speaking for myself, why we haven't written about it that much is the ecosystem's quite diffuse. There aren't dominant players.
Yes.
There aren't dominant providers.
Well, I've been told there are. But I don't know if that's correct.
Such as?
Well, so the what's it called? TIP, which does all sorts of
open Wi-Fi. Are you talking
open Wi-Fi? Yeah. So they were saying, you don't never write anything about open Wi-Fi, and I was like, well, what's the point of that? And they go, well, it's controlled by three big players: Cisco, HPE, and Ruckus. Is it?
Well, hang on. So open Wi-Fi is the attempt to break that down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say that in on the enterprise side, right? So the sort of rough way of splitting the Wi-Fi industry up is the enterprise Wi-Fi side and then all the residential. By the way, the residential is many, many times bigger because there's just so many more households.
Indeed.
Then. So that's by far the biggest. But in terms of on the enterprise side, there's Cisco, there's HP Aruba, there's Juniper Mist, and there's Extreme, and that's about 65% of the world market. And then there are some.
So it's kind of similar to the big three kind of equipment vendors.
But on the other hand, beyond that, there's an undergrowth of a lot of very good vendors.
Right.
Zyxel, Ingenious, and so on and so forth. I should probably mention many more, but those are some of them, and that are typically SME based. But even a company like Netgear does a lot of enterprise Wi-Fi, and they do it very well.
What's the goal though? Because I even though they were telling me about it, I never got my head around.
Oh, for open Wi-Fi?
Yeah, because I guess with Open RAN, it's very much about. I mean, the RAN network's very complicated and includes all sorts of elements. Let's get those from different people.
The Wi-Fi network is somewhat more. It's a lot more simpler, right?
Yeah.
A lot simpler than that. So the goal is basically to disaggregate the stack so that it's not proprietary.
Right.
Because those Wi-Fi vendors have proprietary software all the way up through the stack, right? The big ones. And for this, the idea is we're going to make a standardized interface to the cloud and basically open operating system for the APs. That's it. And with that, you've then disaggregated everything, and then you've got, I think these days, I don't know, probably maybe a dozen hardware providers and with many, many SKUs, right?
Yep.
And so there's actually quite a big community behind it. And then you can mix and match in principle as you wish. And then there's maybe 2, 3, 4 providers of cloud-based controllers that then plug into all of that, right? But basically you can mix and match. That's the idea, is to disaggregate the whole thing and get all the proprietary stuff out there.
Yeah.
And that has actually led to some big deployments. There's some big deployments in India, for example. There's a few in Africa and so on. And by the way, Boingo is a big proponent of this. They're using it for Wi-Fi military bases in the US. And there's many cases.
They're the guys who do stuff at Heathrow, I seem to remember. Or
Boingo Wireless. Boingo, yes.
Is that the massive public wireless?
Yeah.
Public
Wi-Fi.
And they do
Wi-Fi, yes.
Do you think one of the problems with it, I mean, in terms of it not being perceived to be sort of sexy in a way, in the way that 5G is maybe not very sexy, but when it came along, it was like, oh,
more hype,
new
certainly.
thing, hype. Like, what's it going to lead to? Is the monetization to me is not obvious. People sort of take it for granted as a free thing. You go and get your coffee and you don't pay for it. And,
the money involved in Wi-Fi is much, much, much less.
Yeah.
That said, there are companies that make $1 billion a year on Wi-Fi chips, right? So it's not tiny. Right. I mean, I know it's a different scale of things than the mobile world where we're talking about giant sums, right?
Yeah.
But there are companies like that, and I would say, Intel, Qualcomm, certainly Broadcom, they're in the $1 billion club for chips, right?
We sort of take it for granted a bit, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Because even though you're saying the money's less, there's more data on it.
Yeah,
this is like a big issue for mobile.
And we get it free, and we still moan when it's shit as well.
Yeah, I do remember reading a nationwide news story, I think in The Guardian recently, where the whole BT fibre rollout wasn't positioned as a fibre rollout; it was a Wi-Fi rollout. They described it as.
So BT traditionally, by the way, and historically has been super active in Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
And they've been one of the leading service providers, proponents of this, right? So absolutely. So the strange thing is that people, a little before, so thank you. So the strange thing is that people that actually don't write about it is that there is a lot going on. We have, please, I'm not done yet, but I'll have that one as a backup.
That's the sound of us handing out Hazy Jane in the studio for those listening.
Yeah, exactly. What was I going to say about that? Yeah, so there is a lot going on. We've had a very quick succession of new generations. We've had possibly the biggest allocation of mid-band spectrum, allocation meaning unlicensed spectrum, in the history of the world, as far as I know. And you can imagine what would have happened. I quite often say this to people. What if the 5G people had gotten that for IMT? They would be shouting from the rooftops. Of course, it's not possible for many, many reasons, right? But the Wi-Fi industry, except for me and a few other advocates, right, and evangelists and so on, it was very quiet. I mean, everybody in Wi-Fi who works with Wi-Fi.
You mean about the allocation of all that mid-band entirely to 5G?
Right, 1.2 gigahertz of spectrum from 6 gigahertz to 7.2 in the United States, right? Here it's less.
Right.
In the US. That was allocated in one fell swoop, in one go.
Was that
in April of 2020?
Do we call that 6 to 7 mid-band? I was thinking more like 3 to 4 was mid-band.
Okay, maybe mid-band.
Well,
I mean, this is semantical.
I think the mid-band goes quite a long way because you get up to centimetre wave as the next level up. I was thinking, then you're going from 7 to 15.
But the whole 3.5 gig thing was largely given over to mobile as well. So there's been big chunks of the broader mid-band band.
Right.
That have gone there.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Right, there is a lot, and there was 1.2 gigahertz signed into law by Ajit Pai, whom I actually consider, and I don't know if you agree, but certainly in this respect, probably the most visionary piece of spectrum legislation in recent history that he managed to give that away.
Ajit Pai is the former FCC commissioner.
Yes, he's the former US FCC.
So this is when he was in.
He was in office.
Was this controversial doing this?
It
when
was
he did it?
actually surprisingly uncontroversial.
So because you'd have thought the operators would have, given what's going on at the moment in 6 gigahertz in other parts of the world, you'd have thought they'd have kicked up a big stink about it.
I know, isn't it interesting that at the time it was uncontroversial? At least there was very little public talk about we're going to fight this.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that Ajit Pai was the Trump appointee and therefore, by definition, controversial.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hated by a lot of people, especially for repealing the net neutrality.
So why not controversial, given so much spectrum being given away?
But this is a very good question, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
I think for a long time it was very much under the radar. People were not aware of what was going on, and there's a small group, and I have to give them huge credit. Wi-Fi is really driven by very small groups of people that are very committed and very dedicated, and there was a small group, probably of no less than 10 people, that position that whole potential allocation towards the FCC for a long time, and they were folks from HP Aruba, Cisco, and so forth, and also from Meta and Apple and so on. Right? These were the companies that were obviously super interested in this, but it was very much, it wasn't a secret in any way, but it was just not picked up on by the media. And the first time I heard about it, I think, of the whole 6 gigahertz story was in, I think, 2018 or 2019. No, it's before that. Sorry, it might have been in 2017 or 2018. And it was completely out of the blue for me that there was such a thing as 6 gigahertz for Wi-Fi. And I heard about it. Actually, one of my own events, somebody was presenting this and said, where did that come from? And then from there, it actually started taking shape. And Ajit Pai spoke at, I know him a little bit. He's one of the most gracious and kind people. And, I was warned, by the way. I was warned. I was telling people I'm going to go see Ajit Pai from the FCC. And I wrote him, this is a really kind of interesting story. I wrote him and I said, dear Mr. Commissioner, can I come see you? Because I know you're working on 6 gigahertz. I really want to, meet you and talk to you about that. He wrote me back within half an hour and he said, Klaus, I was wondering when you were going to ask.
No.
And I was like, what? I was totally amazed. And I went to see him and people were warning me, say, he is not like the rest of us. Be careful. He's like a shark or something. I don't know what.
Right.
And he turned out to be the kindest, most gracious, friendly person I think I've met in politics. I don't meet that many politicians, I grant you that. But super nice.
And politicians to some degree are good at ingratiating themselves to people.
They are.
But I still think, you're a grown up, you're a smart, experienced person. Your gut feel about a person is still valid.
Very sincere.
Yeah.
That's how I found him. I found him very sincere, very interested in his work, very passionate about what he was doing. And he really believed in that, and still does, presumably, in that story, in the power of setting the airwaves free. This is a kind of in many ways a freedom thing for the entrepreneurs, for the business community to be able to do something that does not require billions of dollars in investment in some radio license.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is a huge thing. When it was first done
So it doesn't work in the way that obviously if this had got provided to the telecom community, there'd have been some ridiculous spectrum auction where $70 billion gets spent and then they never make the money back. And
also who gets to work with that? It's only those in my opinion, monopolistic. It's kind of in the nature of telecoms or mobile telecoms that only these very big companies can play in this game, and then it becomes sort of semi-monopolistic and so on. So Wi-Fi is the antithesis to all of that, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is really important. In 1985, there was a gentleman by the name of, I'm trying to remember what his name is. It'll come to me in just a second. The gentleman at the FCC, he's a good friend of mine, in fact, and I'm just coming back to me in a moment.
And you've just dissed him by
I just did. It'll come to me.
Sorry,
Dr. Michael Marcus. Michael Marcus, he's more than 80 years old now. He's also been at my events. He was one of the primary drivers behind actually releasing the 2.4 junk band. And he talks
Is that what
about
it gets called, the junk band?
It was, at the time, it was called that. Because there's like microwaves and other stuff.
Is that a play on Junk Bond, maybe?
But that was a milestone in wireless history or technology history that was done for spread spectrum. So the idea here was to allow it for spread spectrum, and that had not been done before.
Yeah.
And so that set Wi-Fi going and so on, and then the rest is history. But he talks about that at length of setting the airwaves free, and Ajit Pai very much that sort of thought process for him as well, and I think it will produce tremendous value at sort of the bottom of the pyramid, right, where a lot of people work, a lot of smaller companies work, a lot of innovation happens, a lot of entrepreneurs work. And that's really the beauty of it. And I've always loved that idea. And I think probably originally that's why I got into it. I said, this is just going to make a lot of difference for a lot of people. Well, I tell you,
I mean, another thing that strikes me sometimes, like something I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit, is this WRC 23, which is the World Radio Conference or something like that. Radio Communication Conference. Yes. There we go.
It's getting underway now, isn't it?
It's kicking off now. It lasts about a month. That's a hell of a fucking conference.
If you're a journalist, I've been told it's only worth going there for the last 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
For all the voting or whatever.
Well, because the whole
for them actually concluding stuff.
You wouldn't have anything to cover. It's just them chatting about what's going to happen.
Correct.
But anyway, this is about to kick off, and one of the things I know, I'm sure I wrote a story about it recently, but the rubbish search function on Telecoms.com isn't letting me find it.
Oh, no.
So this finishes in mid-December.
Yeah, right? But anyway, but I know that one of the big things they're going to discuss there, and I'm just going to put a pin in this now, but I'm going to tee it up because there's one or two things that I wanted to ask to start off with. That typically for this podcast we went off on a tangent. And
sure.
Part of my job is to occasionally steer it gently back.
Please do.
We have been talking about Wi-Fi.
It's not a bad tangent. I just had one or two things I wanted to ask Claus at the start, and I never did it. No. But we'll put a pin in it because we'll come back to it. They're going to chat about, I think it's the upper 6 gigahertz band, and there are
correct.
And there's basically, should that be given to Wi-Fi? Should it be given to mobile? Should it be shared? So we'll get into the pros and cons of all that. But what I want to ask before we go on, firstly, what's with the hat?
Oh, the hat. It's because I actually came to London because I wanted to experience the Royal Opera. So I was at the Royal Opera last night.
Nice.
At the
Covent Garden.
Yeah.
I've never been there. I bet it's a great building.
It's beautiful, and I don't know if you like that kind of music, but we were mesmerized.
I do in principle, but I've never been.
Okay.
He does. Look at his T-shirt.
So actually, I did not.
I'm going to get an AC/DC one for my dad. That was his favourite band. So
I didn't.
If I wear that will be the reason.
Right, okay. So I didn't wear this hat at the event, but I do have sort of a long coat, and then I just went past this hat shop and I just tried this on. I thought this is perfect for London, so I just
suits you as well.
No, there's a part of me.
Thank you for saying that. I thought so as well.
Yeah, it looks cool. It's just I just thought it required explanation.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
'Cause it's slightly incongruous.
Yes, it is.
But as you can tell, I'm not inclined to dress up.
Right.
But there is a part of me that slightly regrets the era of bowler hats and long frock coats and that sort of thing.
Yes, and you still have just a little taste of that here in London, right? And we don't have that, I don't think, anywhere else, honestly. But you do have the little shops with the bowler
you do.
Well, and I mean, I think, just some of the cliches associated with the UK, England, London are the very traditional old school sort of stuff. The pageantry and the stiff upper lip and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, cool. So that was that. And then I also wanted to ask, just before we get back into Wi-Fi in general.
Yes.
Wi-Fi Now. Why don't you just tell us what that's all about?
Okay, so Wi-Fi Now is a company that I formed, 7-8 years ago now. I had a series of Wi-Fi events. I was organizing a series of Wi-Fi events, and about 10 years ago.
Right. So you've been well into Wi-Fi for a while.
For more than 10 years, yeah.
Perhaps more than is healthy.
Probably, because this is my entire life now, right? I spent all the you're absolutely right. So anyway, I found out that events at the time, actually, I was kind of a washed up mobile industry consultant. I used to do projects for actually spectrum strategy and stuff like that. I used to do that. And I found them increasingly boring, and they were also increasingly difficult to get because it used to be a very lucrative market for
Ian even got involved in that sort of thing back in the day, didn't you?
Did you? Yeah.
Well, I used to work for a company called Analysis, which is now Analysis.
Of course. Yeah, I know Analysis.
So I used to do 3G bid book sort of applications
stuff like that.
on site. You get locked in a bunker and
I did
let out for 2 hours of daylight.
No, exactly. It was horrifying. Spectral valuation. This is what I was on the technical side. This is what I was doing for a long time. And then that sort of dried out, and it was horrible anyway. So I thought, what do I do now? So I started doing a little bit of work on Wi-Fi, on comparing actually Wi-Fi and small cells. This was my first, it was a light reading report actually way back.
Okay.
And then this Swedish company said, would you like to do a white paper for us? And it kind of went from there. And then a friend of mine I had in the event business said, why don't we, I actually proposed to him, why don't we do a Wi-Fi event? And wow. I was amazed. I was amazed at how many people were interested in that. So that was how it started. And then I eventually went out on my own and started Wi-Fi Now. And then we used to be only events.
Okay.
And now what actually happened during the lockdowns, I call them the lockdowns because I do not like the other word. I probably shouldn't say that, but I do not.
What's the other word? Or
COVID.
You mean just you're talking about lockdowns in general and you're not qualifying them with the COVID thing? Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah. I wasn't a fan of the lockdowns. And we kept recording live podcasts throughout the lockdowns. Yeah. We came into the office when no one else was
broke
coming in.
And let me say this, I even wrote this on LinkedIn, and this is a completely, we could go on forever.
Well,
but I wrote on LinkedIn, and I'm actually proud to this day. We never closed our offices. We never asked anybody to wear a mask. We never ask anybody to show proof of anything whatsoever related to tests or vaccinations. We never once, in connection with our events, asked anybody to show proof of anything whatsoever. Never. And I was one of the first people actually on LinkedIn to say that. Say, hashtag everybody is welcome. We have been using, and I can tell you this, and I need to tell you this as well. The two first locations where we did actual in-person events, and we call them Wi-Fi World Congress now.
Okay.
Just because that name is not taken, right?
Although the other World Congress was less laissez-faire than you when it came to masks and vaccinations.
Exactly, absolutely. So here's the two locations where we did the events in last year. Was it last year? Yes. Mexico, because the requirements there were very light and it was practically a free country.
Right.
So Novak Djokovic could play tennis there, for example.
Exactly. And where else? Guess, in Stockholm. Because they never.
Yeah.
Oh, they never.
Well, they're the hero country.
They are the hero country. So not only were those very successful events and everybody got there, I only had one or two people comment, "Oh, your events are unsafe." So we follow whatever rules are in the country.
Yeah.
And there happen to be no rules, as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I'm doing. But so of course, we never broke any rules. It would be crazy to do that. Yeah. But I wanted to make a point of the fact that we don't require any. And I actually think it's incredibly discriminatory to and I might as well say this right now, and I've even written on LinkedIn. Anybody, even at the time, who was requiring tests and vaccinations, whatever, to attend an event, in my book, is not the way to
especially especially vaccinations, because tests and masks and that sort of thing.
I've had to do that as well.
They're not a matter of bodily autonomy, whereas vaccinations are. So that's why. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say I'm sort of on that side of the fence as well, but I feel that the world wasn't.
No,
that's the problem with doing that.
No, it wasn't. But that's what
if you do things like that and you did it in Mexico,
they're going to shun you.
They're going to shun you, and they're going to say they're being irresponsible,
Correct,
and then you get abused on Twitter, and it's like they're not being safe.
Correct. So the interesting thing is they didn't, by and large. Right. I had one or two things, one or two people say that to me, but it was very few people, and generally, I think, and then when people finally got together at my events. In both Mexico, by the way, we held it in Cancun. Can you believe it? And we had more than 300 people there, and people were super happy to travel there, especially lots of Americans. At the time, I couldn't go to the U.S. because I'm not vaccinated. I could not go to America.
Well, quite.
Right? I only recently could actually go to the U.S. again.
Back to Djokovic. He hasn't been able to go in US tournaments until quite recently. The US was one of the last to
they were one of the last.
remove that.
Well, he couldn't. So interestingly, he couldn't go, I think, to the warm-up events for the US Open, but he could go to the US Open
because that was the cut-off.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. But anyway, when people finally got together at our events, they were incredibly happy, of course, to get together in person because it means a lot to see other people in the flesh, right?
Yeah.
So it was in many ways, a huge success and heartwarming as well to get people together again, right? And so,
what is the? I mean, we know about events. Informa that owns both of our websites is first and foremost an events company.
Of course, yes.
What is the purpose of your events? Is it just general networking around Wi-Fi industry stakeholders? What?
Yeah, well, you could say that, but I consider us an influencer event, meaning the folks that are really working on the forefront of Wi-Fi, in many respects, both on the pure connectivity side, if you like, but also with, for example, AI is a big thing in Wi-Fi, and it's expanding. And also on the device side to understand what is going on the device side and what, including XR and things like that. Companies that are looking at how to enable some of these use cases on enterprise networks, for example. Cisco does a lot of work. Aruba does a lot of work. Many of the others do a lot of work. So it is a cutting edge type event. And I have to say, I don't think there's anywhere where you can go to get more up-to-date and precise information. The two buzzwords that I've always had to guide my events is innovation and opportunity. We want to put those together. So it's the technology, of course, is all there, right? We present it and showcase it, and it's up to our clients to do that. But the business side is very much in focus. How do we turn this into... Right.
Well, I mean,
how do we
turn the point of all trade shows ultimately, isn't it?
Precisely. So it's sort of a trade show. It's more of an. I mean, we do have a trade show floor, right?
We've got an exhibition.
We have an exhibition, and we get like maybe 30 or so exhibitors, and we're super happy. We think that's going to grow.
Yeah.
But it's very much a thought leadership type event, and that's why there's so many. And we've got. I mean, our clients are really, really big ones like Intel and Qualcomm and Cisco, and also a huge undergrowth of startups as well, and they so that's where it's really interesting speaking to you and knowing about your organization and just touching on how I framed things at the start. Us journalists, Telecoms.com typically publishes, let's say, 5 or 6 news stories a day, and we have to choose among all kinds of whatever's going on. And probably quite often, if we get a press release through that's to do with Wi-Fi, the ultimate question a journalist should always ask on behalf of their audience is, why should I give a shit? Yes, what does it matter?
But I have to admit that we're often operating under very information and time constrained circumstances.
Yes.
Where it's not like we can have an exhaustive look into everything surrounding that particular announcement and make an extremely qualified call on whether this is a bigger story than something else.
Right.
It's kind of gut feel. The decisions are kind of made within about the first hour of the day.
Yes.
And then the rest of it's spent writing and publishing.
Yes.
So I think it's really interesting. But then Wi-Fi is ubiquitous and Wi-Fi is relevant to everyone. I mean, I'm regretting the fact that I didn't get around to sticking my phone on the office Wi-Fi here because the cellulose is so dodgy in this building.
I wouldn't regret it because you keep dropping off it every time you put your phone down.
Well, that's another matter. Maybe
it's substandard Wi-Fi. It needs someone in the Wi-Fi community to look at it and give it a kick up the arse, basically.
Right.
So one thing I want to say before, there's 2 more things I want to cover before I'm going to have to move things on in the interest of time.
Yes.
One is the one we just alluded to, which I might get to now before we forget it, and then I just want to conclude with an offer to you more generally to pitch to us and our audience about why we should give more of a shit about Wi-Fi.
I'd love to.
But let's get the nitty gritty of this more immediate thing out the way first, which is this WRC 23.
Yes.
And now there's what my understanding and my recollection of a story I've written, but I can't find it on the goddamn website. That there's the upper half of a 6 gigahertz band.
Correct.
So probably about 500 gigahertz of spectrum, megahertz of spectrum. that's going begging, and at this World Radio Communication Conference, once they've finished fucking around for about a month, they're gonna make some kind of call on whether that gets given entirely to mobile, entirely to Wi-Fi, or some or all of it is shared spectrum. So I was just wondering if you can frame that, as it's quite topical. And
right.
give us
So
your
this
thoughts
is super
on it.
important, and of course, a lot of folks right now at the highest senior levels of the industry are right now working super hard on making sure that we get the right result out of WRC. So that including the Wi-Fi lines and lots of other people. So so the purpose, or I should say the mission of the Wi-Fi industry at WRC 23 is to have that band declared, if you like, no change. Because the way the regulation stands at the moment actually gives pretty much, as I understand it, and I don't have, super high resolution but on this issue, but I think pretty much every country in the world the opportunity to adopt a similar model to what the FCC has done. Meaning you could, if there is no change. So if there is no change, it would be possible through obviously studying and so on and all the things that these regulatory bodies have to go through to qualify, but to come to a point where they could then allocate or free up a big chunk of that band for shared unlicensed access if the result is no change.
Yeah.
So what the IMT community wants to do...
No change being it's not licensed right now.
It is
Is that what no change means?
It doesn't... Well, okay. So I have to be careful here because regulation is incredibly complicated. But what it actually means is there are incumbents.
Okay.
So here's the thing. There are incumbents at that band. And those incumbents are typically utilities for point-to-point microwave. And a big chunk of the satellite industry uses that band for ground stations and so on. So no change means you don't touch any of that. And within the confines of that regulation, Wi-Fi actually works really well. And we know that it's...
So you're sort of finding the nooks and crannies around those.
Correct. And
those
if the power
incumbents.
levels are right, and if you use something called AFC, and I don't know if you know this, but this is right. So actually we need to talk just a little bit about that.
No, go for it.
So if you use something called AFC, and I'll talk to you about it, then you can actually manage to put Wi-Fi into that spectrum, and you will not have detrimental effects on whatever incumbents are there. So in fact, the interesting thing is the Wi-Fi industry we want that peace, right, everywhere, or we want no change, I should say, right? So that each country or region or whomever can then go ahead and start working on how do we put this into regulation or into some form of allocation of Wi-Fi frequencies for our country or for region. But what's important here is AFC. I want to get back to that.
Yeah.
AFC is automatic frequency coordination. What is it? It means it is a method by which you will determine by database lookup whether your Wi-Fi access point is allowed to transmit on a certain frequency at what we call standard power. It also gets a little bit involved, but there's standard power and there's indoor low power. So in the US, for example, I think the right number is 850 megahertz of spectrum is allocated for indoor or outdoor use at standard power, which is the power level of the original 5 gigahertz band and 2.4 band, right? So that's why it's called standard power. You can do that and you can operate anywhere you want, except you need to query the database to find out there is not a utility service using that band or something else using that band.
And there's technology that enables that to happen quite dynamically.
Exactly. And AFC is actually now completely established.
Sounds a bit blockchainy to me, or at least potentially.
It could have actually been. Yeah. It could have been. I don't think that's what they're using, but it could have been that. But so this is actually all in place now. And Canada became the first country to actually authorize an AFC operator. There needs to be AFC. FCC has a long list of folks that are potential AFC operators. So what does this mean? It means you can get standard power in 850 megahertz of spectrum is a lot of spectrum. Wi-Fi, outdoors as well. So for stadiums, for example, for anywhere you want to do standard power, mostly that top 6 gigahertz band, right? So this is what, in other words, what we would like to see other countries embark on, at least the process to be able to verify that this is possible, because this has been going on in the US for a long time, and it has been verified. I'm
just going to quickly butt in with a thought. You're talking about things like stadiums. It strikes me that the use case argument is similar to what we hear with mobile, there's a reason why before 5G with mobile we're generally sub 2 gigahertz in what we use because it's got better propagation, better range, and all that sort of thing. But when you're talking stadiums and airports and malls and that sort of thing, then suddenly where people are much more compressed, suddenly, and there's these greater sort of tranches of bandwidth. Then you've got that argument. We've all been in stadiums and airports and stuff where the Wi-Fi's been shit. But then in the same place, the cellular's probably shit. So it strikes me from what you've said, and I'm saying this partly for you to correct me if I'm oversimplifying, if I got it wrong, that this is what we're saying. We've got two different sets of stakeholders looking for this big bit of real estate that's going to help with these highly congested sort of environments. Is that right?
That's roughly right. So the issue, though, is if you look at who the contenders are. So, by the way, Wi-Fi in the full 6 gigahertz band, including the top half, is a done deal. It is in the sense that, not WRC sense, but in the sense that this equipment exists, it works, it's been around for years, literally. It is ready to even go to standard power because it's the same equipment, essentially, that has been dimensioned for both. So you can basically switch it on for standard power, most of it. And so on and so forth. So this entire ecosystem is ready. It's there. And I just spoke to the Wi-Fi Alliance, and what they're doing at WRC is they have a booth where they're showing all of this capability with existing equipment, commercially available equipment. So the second thing is, if you actually look at what the IMT folks or the mobile folks intend to do, I do not believe that there's any mobile technology that will be able to accommodate the incumbents. I don't understand how they would do that. I'm not sure they do. They think there might be.
What do you mean by accommodate the incumbents?
The guys that are using
the existing bands, the folks in the existing.
The guys
so there isn't technology to make use of this upper band of 6 gigas. Is that what you're saying?
No, because the mobile guys want the whole thing allocated to. Yeah. So they don't want status quo.
Yeah,
as Claus was saying, where you have the people who are using it are just left in place, and you run your little sort of dynamic spectrum check. Is anybody using it? They want the whole thing allocated to.
And it's a point
potentially. I think
I was just trying to understand what Claus was saying. Is your point that you don't think they would be able to utilize?
They would not be able to use it.
Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to check.
No. Exactly. You're exactly right. They would not be able to utilize it because they would actually need to make proper commercial use of it, as I see it, is to have those incumbents removed.
Yeah.
But it's quite impossible.
But they've had that done before, haven't they? With satellite. They've had it done. I mean, if you talk to BT and Vodafone in this country, who both make the point when they talk about this issue that they are Wi-Fi operators as well, and therefore they don't have a necessarily a vested interest in sticking up for one or the other. They go, well, if you look at both of them, Wi-Fi can cope, but in mobile, we're going to be in real trouble unless we get access to this resource in a few years' time with capacity on networks.
That is their typical argument, right? Yeah. But I mean, the issue is then so as somebody said, it's the 10-year road to nowhere because there's nowhere to put those incumbents.
Yeah.
Right? You can't. I mean, where would you put them? So and that is an incredibly complicated question, and then. In addition to that, who would pay for it to remove them, right? So I just don't think it's doable in any which way, and I think people will eventually come to their senses and say there is no argument in favor of trying to harmonize.
You think you're optimistic it will sort of be status quo and no change? Because it'd be the mobile industry would perceive that as a bit of a disaster, I think, wouldn't they? And they'd probably come out with a load of studies saying, well, the amount of equipment we now need to build to put up 3.5 gigahertz stuff and use existing bands that are already kind of congested is going to require billions of investment.
I don't know how much of a disaster they think they would be. Maybe they would present it like that. I think there are a few countries that are very much on the mobile side, but it's a minority of countries, and I just do not believe they have the arguments in place to defend that IMT.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Vodafone and people like that say if it does go.
Well, it's funny you say Vodafone. I think I found the story that I wrote, which was headlined "Vodafone lobbies for upper 6 gigahertz band."
I mean, I don't think their positions are unusual among the big telco groups. But is there kind of an argument?
Part of the audio.
It's part of the audio
experience.
Yeah.
Is there an argument about? I mean, one thing that gets linked to 5G, and I know we haven't seen the fruition of this yet, but this sort of idea that it gives rise to new types of service, that it's you can do sophisticated things on it like slicing, you can expose certain features of the 5G network to take advantage of things.
With the 6 gigahertz, you mean?
No, I'm just talking about 5G down wherever you put it, that this technology has, and this is the argument for sort of private 5G, isn't it, as opposed to Wi-Fi,
right.
is that when we go in there with private 5G as opposed to Wi-Fi, we can offer features that we couldn't possibly do on a Wi-Fi network.
Maybe. But vice versa also.
But I'm just wondering what the Wi-Fi position is on that.
I agree.
On private wireless, on private 5G?
Like on this idea that private 5G is so much better than having an enterprise Wi-Fi network in place in terms of what it lets you do.
Well, okay, so there's a few things there. First of all, I think enterprise Wi-Fi is the default for enterprises anyway. I don't think anyone is going to say we're only going to do private 5G in this enterprise. I mean, every enterprise has Wi-Fi, let's face it. So I don't think in that sense it's a threat to anything enterprise Wi-Fi that you might have, something called private 5G, right? So that's the first thing. And I think private 5G, to me, I see it as a top, handful of percent of companies that might entertain that. I think by far most enterprises are perfectly good with what they have with very good and very quickly evolving Wi-Fi solutions, right?
Does that go for sort of the residential stuff as well? I mean, some of the whizzy new features like VR and AR that I guess the 5G guys would like to see those headsets being made compatible with that. But
residential, anything basically, I think anything indoors is huge Wi-Fi territory.
Yeah,
residential is
I'm kind of
so
with you
entrenched.
I'm kind of with you on that.
I mean,
we've often chatted about it when people have banged on about both like sort of capacity and that sort of thing, and one of the use cases for 5G has always been this VR AR thing, and we've chatted on the pod about no one's going to fucking go around in the
that's why I'm
street
asking.
with a
but
that's why I'm putting the point across, because the argument would be that you have things on the 5G network that you can do that you can't possibly do on Wi-Fi, and it's kind of interesting getting the Wi-Fi person's perspective on.
Right. Okay.
On
so my perspective on
I'll stop butting in. By the way, I'll say one thing.
What?
My dad used to listen to the podcast, and one of the criticisms he had on me is that I butted into you too much. So
it's okay. It's your show, Scott. You can do anything you want.
Well, no, but I took that criticism on board, and obviously still sometimes butting a bit too much, but I think I do so less, and so you got my dad to thank for that, Iain, for you getting a word in edgeways. Good. Anyway,
my dad actually he passed away a number of years ago.
Okay.
He actually came to one of my events, and it was the only event I ever did in Copenhagen, which is originally my hometown. And he actually came to my event, and he was at the time 84 years old. And he sat there, and he was mesmerized. He said, "It's a great event. I have no idea what you're talking about."
Yeah,
but it was very sweet, and I'm so happy that he got to experience.
I think that was largely my dad's feeling when listening to the podcast. But he knew when I was cutting Iain off. But anyway, having said that, I'll honour his memory by shutting the fuck up and letting you finish.
Sorry. So let me just talk about XR, AR, VR, XR, whatever you want to call it. So here's the thing. What we believe in the Wi-Fi industry is that you cannot really have rendering on the device. Why can you not have rendering on the device? Because it'll be too much processor power, it'll be too much heat, and it'll be very difficult to make a device that actually fits on your head. Glasses, even that, forget it.
Yeah.
So what you do need is a super fast Wi-Fi chip that basically just sends the stream of data, right, to whatever piece needs to do the rendering and the processing and back. This is the only way to do a proper XR type device, because otherwise you're stuck with this heat and all these processors on your head.
Just too much.
It's not going to work. And that is actually, so Wi-Fi 7, including things like what we now call multi-link operation, which is redundancy essentially, right? We used to call it in the mobile world, right? To multiple streams.
Yeah.
And for both reliability and also...
I was going to ask you about Wi-Fi 7, so thank you.
Good.
Continue on that tangent.
Yes. So that's a very important feature in Wi-Fi 7. There's a number of really important features. One is that everything is, higher modulation, blah, 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 and 320 megahertz channels. And so which means the raw sort of data rate will get higher and faster and all that. But the sort of marquee feature is multiple links, multi-link operation. And that means basically two things. Faster as well, but very high reliability because... You've got the redundancy built in. And very low latency because you have the redundancy built in. And this you can have on the XR devices as well, of course. And I think that's one of the big things that it has actually been designed for.
The latency a big deal gets made of the latency in 5G, but there's obviously no reason why Wi-Fi can't offer low latency.
Right. And one of the funniest things during the 5G show, when it was obviously the years and years of hype, was actually understanding that Wi-Fi is naturally low latency.
Yeah.
And what the 5G people were saying at the time was already, in many cases, there and available with Wi-Fi. I'm sorry to say this, but it was not a big deal for Wi-Fi people. So we already get that. If you design it properly, we already get that. Why? Because it's not a protocol-heavy thing.
Yeah.
It's a PHY and MAC layer, essentially. So it's not a protocol-heavy thing. And in 5G, you've got all these protocols running, right? So there's bound to be...
Well, I would have thought it would be physics just to some extent, because if you've got it in your home and you've got a fiber line to it, then you're only talking about...
the last mile is the last meter.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Well, instead of being like a mile from a base station or something, I don't know. But in terms of some of these, really cliched services that will probably never happen, but maybe they will, I don't know, like...
remote surgery.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. Could you...
Stay the fuck away from me with that scalpel.
Could you do that sort of thing on Wi-Fi?
Exactly. I would never do it on any technology. But could you do it technically? I mean, could you design a Wi-Fi network that would work as... Yeah, I'm sure you could. But would you want to? I don't know. I would not want to do that. Do you want me to say a few words about Wi-Fi 7?
Please do, yeah.
Okay, so first thing, I have to sort of... also tell people out there so that they know this is just for information. The certification program for Wi-Fi 7 is not here yet. There are products. It always so happens like this in the Wi-Fi industry that
it's very current. It's very new.
Yes,
Wi-Fi 7.
It's very new, and there are products out there. There are, including some handsets. The Google Pixel 8, I think, is a Wi-Fi 7 handset, and there's a number of others as well. So
what have I got? I've got a Pixel.
Have you got a Pixel?
Don't think it's an 8 though.
No.
Really.
Pixel 8
but my router probably can't.
No, your router will be able to. Yeah. So anyway, so the certification program, the proper interoperability testing, although some has been going on. It's not that they're not interoperable, but the proper one is coming out from the Wi-Fi Alliance end of first quarter. So from that point on, you can get it properly certified and so on. And that it's always been like that. It's not that if you buy a Wi-Fi 7 device now that it won't work and won't play properly with anybody else. It's just for whatever reason, that's the process that, all the cycles, that's a cycle that's always been going through. Anyway, Wi-Fi 7, a couple of things that makes it faster, 320 megahertz channel, so very wide channels.
Fat pipe.
Big fat pipe. Obviously, you need to be fairly close to the router and all of that, right? For these fat pipes.
Pipe. Controversial.
Yeah.
Every time we say that, we talk about an analyst friend of ours called Dean Bubbly, who doesn't like that.
I love Dean.
Yeah, no, we love Dean as well.
He doesn't like
he doesn't like the metaphor of the pipe.
Oh, he doesn't like that?
No.
Dean has a certain, what do you call it in American, pet peeves, right?
Yes, definitely.
Very much so.
I don't know if you say that in the UK, but he very much has these. He also doesn't like the word seamless.
No, or digital.
Or digital.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I have the hugest respect. We're very good friends.
I kind of agree with him on the digital one.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, I've got. I'm helping host and run an event on the 30th of November, where two of my favourite analysts, who are partly because they're so outspoken, I've always wanted to get them together to argue with each other. Dean Bubbly and John Strand.
Oh, goodness me.
So I'm going to get
God
them.
help us all.
So I'm going to. I know.
Dean, I'm happy with. I'm not so sure about John.
Oh, hello. He listens to the pod. But I know we're moderating.
To the pod?
Yeah, he listens all the time.
I have a history with John. Don't get me started. Yeah.
All right.
Because we're both Danish.
Well, quite. That's one of the reasons I thought of him. But anyway, he'll probably get a shout out in a bit. He quite often does in the pod, because one of the stories I want to talk about in a bit, I quoted, not him by person, but a Strand Consult thing. But anyway, the reason I mentioned John in the context of Dean is they're two of the most strident and outspoken analysts I know.
Correct.
And I thought, what fun to get them together on stage.
That will be a blast.
Argue the toss.
When are you going to do that?
30th of November. So there's a little plug for that. So it's on the same day as the Glotel Awards. I'm going to get commercial for a sec.
Right, yeah.
Same day as the Glotel Awards, which you're welcome to come to as well.
Yeah.
Although I think you got to pay to come to that. Sorry.
Put your promo voice on again. You did it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Come to the Glotel Awards.
Yes. It'll be a great night out. Great night out, mate. And then during the day, we've got something called Future Vision. It's in the same location, so you don't even need to get a cab or anything.
You don't even need to leave the bar area.
You can just sit and get slowly pissed all day. And Iain, You're going to be interviewing someone there. I'm going to be interviewing someone. It's going to be really good. We've got people like Howard Watson, Yago Tenorio, proper, senior execs. But then we're also going to have panels where I've been involved with them. I've tried to set them up such that it's going to be really strident, sort of heated discussion rather than people being cautious or agreeing with each other. Yes. Anyway, that's the only reason I bring it up. What was that tangent? Oh, yeah, pipes. That's how we went.
Yeah, pipes. Yeah. I wanted to say a few words more about Wi-Fi 7.
Yes, please.
By the way, while I was just thinking about your comment on why don't you cover Wi-Fi so much, I think I'm also a journalist, by the way. I have a background in engineering originally, and then I went to Nokia. I actually have an acoustical engineering background, believe it or not. Then I went to Nokia. I was there for 8 years and got trained in telecoms. That was my whole sort of upbringing in telecoms, which was fantastic. That was during the time where it was the glory days.
Well, you get to chat about them more in a minute.
Oh, right, exactly. So that was fantastic. So they brought me up, if you like. But then I actually got a degree at London School of Journalism, a diploma degree.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, very cool. And it was just like a little diploma.
I think I got a diploma there as well, if I remember rightly. Yeah, about 20 years ago.
I did the same.
No way.
No way.
Yeah.
Dude.
That's amazing. We're like alumni.
Yeah. Mine was a pure correspondence course.
Yeah, so was mine.
Right. No, I was actually here in London. I was in London for 3 months doing it.
No, I lived in London, but it was still a correspondence course.
No,
it was that budget.
I did it the same way.
Yeah. But I mean, I think
it was internet journalism, my course.
Ah, right.
Right. Anyway, go on.
No, anyway, I love journalism, by the way, and I'm a huge believer in it, and I think it obviously also has to be done properly. But the thing is, for you in your position, you have to go for whatever is big, either in money terms or socioeconomic terms or whatever. Yeah. I mean, and Wi-Fi is maybe I think in terms of chips, it's probably $25 billion, and in overall, it's maybe, I mean, not much more than that. So we're talking about something that is not has huge impact, but in terms of the companies involved and so on, telecoms in general, in terms of mobile telecoms and so on, is so much bigger. So I totally get that you don't get to covering it.
And also it's diffuse. So it's not like if we're going to write about mobile technology and something comes in from Ericsson, it's obviously going to get our attention, or Nokia. Yes. Because, they're the two dominant companies, and even Huawei now, even though we're not allowed them.
No.
But and obviously I know companies like Broadcom and so on are big companies, but there's just something about a press release coming in from Nokia or Ericsson where I think, okay, there's a half a chance this is going to be relevant.
Yeah.
Whereas there's not such an obvious call on Wi-Fi press releases.
It's not. And actually, one of the reasons why
Broadcom's big in Nokia.
Broadcom's big in Nokia. Oh yeah, and their network chips.
All their radios have got Broadcom chips.
Oh really?
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Yeah. So one of the reasons why so many people come to us is because you don't cover it. So I don't mind.
Right. So we're doing you a favour by being half-assed.
I mean, it's a niche, right? We've got maybe 10,000 folks that actually read our stuff on a regular basis, which is quite a lot of people, I think. And they swear by it, a lot of them, because that's the reference. Our news work is the reference.
Okay, so you got an active sort of news publication bit.
Yes. Wi-Fi Now.
Right. If I know you were a competition, I wouldn't have invited you.
Yes, but we just decided we're not because you don't cover it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just going to talk about Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah.
Be there for a sec.
And then after that, if it's all right, I'm going to move it on just in the interest.
Yeah. No problem. Just the last thing I want to say about it. So 320 megahertz channels are the bigger pipe. Dean doesn't like that. And and 4K QAM, which is the higher modulation. So that's going to get. I mean, the chips are now up to 35 gigahertz, which is insane, right? 35 gigahertz for a Wi-Fi chip. Who would ever use that, you think, right? But some people are going to use it at some point.
Well, we always say you don't need it, and then we use it.
Then you use it anyway. So. But the two really big features in Wi-Fi 7 are multi-link operation. So that's the multiple streams, right?
That you were just talking about.
And the other one is something called, again, it's a terrible name, but it's called preamble puncturing. And what it's terrible, right? It's terrible.
It's great.
So the Wi-Fi industry not been known for brilliant marketing names. Although
preamble puncturing, I like it though. It appeals to me.
Sounds like trying to shorten the start of a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, stop talking shit and get on with the podcast.
Right. So Wi-Fi has never been known for really good marketing names, but at least we got away from 8.2.11.8.
That was not very catchy.
That was not catchy.
Especially when you start getting into 2 letters after.
Yes. 2 letters. But it's always been 2 letters. I think it's always been.
No, there was N.
No, there was an N. So you're right. It's not always been. And G as well. Okay. But this preamble puncturing, what it actually does, it lets you notch out a piece of spectrum that you do not want to work in. So, for example, if you said this piece of spectrum, for whatever reason, is interfere with, it's not clean or whatever, You can notch that out. And that is really powerful if you want really good quality. So multi-streams and interference.
Why does being able to rule out chunks of spectrum improve performance or quality or whatever?
Well, it just allows you much cleaner bit rate,
It's just
right?
the focus.
Yeah.
So you're basically going, I guess that's where the preamble bit comes in. We're not having to have the preamble, the discussion about this bit. That's just ruled out from the start. So, yeah, I can see that now.
Yeah.
With my limited understanding of the physics of all these things.
Yeah. So that it just becomes a much cleaner stream if you can take out the interfering piece. So those are the two big ones.
What's the difference between 6 and 6E?
This is very
What we
important.
were talking about when before you
this
came
is
in.
very, very important.
And
Everybody
then
should
we're
know.
definitely fucking
Do
moving
people
on.
not
like
know?
this.
No, exactly. Do
He always
people
does this.
on
When I
your-
say I'm going to move on, he's got one more big ass question.
People on this stream, including you guys, you
I
should
should
know
butt in
what
more.
this is. And we have been clearly remiss in educating people on very, 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 very simple things like that. 6 and 6E is the same except for one thing. 6E is 6 gigahertz territory. That's the whole difference.
So it's relevant to this, what we've just been talking about.
Okay.
6E is 6 gigahertz. There's probably
I'll allow it.
a dozen service providers in Europe, like ISPs, that actually use 6E, including Orange and Bouygues and some, I think, in Germany. And Vodafone, actually, here in the UK, also has 6E routers for your home.
Right.
So this is very important. I'm shocked that you guys didn't know this. You should.
No, we're shit at our jobs. Well, speaking only for myself.
Share Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we're shit at Wi-Fi, which I'm the
we
first to
can fix
admit.
that, though. You
Well,
just bring me
exactly.
along.
you fixed it a lot right now.
All right, good. Next
Cool.
one.
Yeah, all right. Well, look, that's brilliant. And, as ever, as we were saying before we started recording, you were asking about the format of the pod, and I said that we sort of draw quite heavily on Rogan because he does these 3-hour ones. But one of the reasons they're 3 hours is because there are things like this, especially when it's our day job, we could chat about it almost indefinitely.
Absolutely.
Because he goes off on massive tangents.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They're interesting.
And it is, and this is great, and I'm really grateful. I feel that Wi-Fi has been underrepresented in the pod, so hopefully we've corrected that slightly. Anyway, moving on now. So this Nokia trip that I was going to go on was to a place. How do you pronounce the Ulu?
Well, I mean,
It's
if you're
O-U-L.
Finnish, you pronounce it differently, but we pronounce it.
Give it a go.
Ulu. That's how they seem to be saying it.
Oh, okay.
Probably. It's like when you try and
I was
speak in
gonna hear you.
Danish, which is the most
Danish
garbled
is a mad
language on
language.
the planet.
Hopelessly
probably.
difficult
No
for
one can actually say it.
Okay, so we'll say Ulu for now, but it's O-U-L-U, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
It's actually not in the north of Finland.
well,
It's north of Helsinki, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you look at the map of
it's on the southern
surprised.
edge of Lapland, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not even really in Lapland. It's kind of on the edge of Lapland. You have to get a little bit further north.
So you've got,
to get-
if you picture the shape of Scandinavia, you've got this big bay going into it called the Gulf of
although
Bothnia.
Finland isn't Scandinavia.
So, yeah.
Oh, but they think they are.
No, but
No,
apparently
they think
there's a
they're Nordic.
semantical
They're
thing.
not-
They're
they're not
Nordic, but not
Scandinavian.
Scandinavian.
But I always heard from the Nokia people that they're part of Scandinavia.
Oh, okay.
But
I got corrected that.
I don't
used to
think
have a
they
colleague
are, but
who
they
was
used to
Finnish.
say
I
that.
know, but-
Oh, right, okay.
I used to have a colleague who's Finnish who's going, no, we're Nordic, not
They're
Scandinavian.
Nordic, but the language.
I agree with that.
The language
I just heard the
is
opposite.
entirely different.
Yeah, 'cause I think,
for sure.
Yeah.
language is more in common with Hungarian or something, isn't it?
Well, they weren't even sure about that. I think that came up at dinner.
But it's got
one
fuck all
night.
to do with Swedish and
Even
Danish.
worse,
and all
they
that.
they seriously think that Santa Claus comes from Lapland. I kid you not. They really
Well, it does,
think
doesn't he? Where do you think he comes
Yeah, hold
from?
on. I'm going to have to stop you there, Claus.
Are you with the? Are you with
No,
the,
no.
or
I
that
think
side? Or are you
Santa
on the
Claus
North
comes-
Pole side? Because in America they say.
I
North
always
Pole.
see. No, I don't have strong feelings on it. I do associate
It clearly
Lapland
doesn't come
with
from
Santa.
the North Pole because it's too bloody cold, right? Nobody can survive in the North Pole.
I didn't actually
tease.
tease the two things apart. I thought Lapland was halfway to the North
Well,
Pole anyway.
it's in the Arctic
They're
Circle.
very serious about this Santa Claus thing.
So I
They
think
use it for marketing.
Oh, I bet they do.
They do.
Ulu's about 100 miles south of the
Yeah,
Arctic
so
Circle.
it's at the north
you're-
of the Gulf that I was going to talk about, the Gulf of Bothnia, it's called.
Is
Yes.
it?
With
I
a
didn't know
TH. Yeah.
Yes.
That's that big gulf. And it's right on the north of that. And it's apparently outside of Russia, it's the most northern conurbation that can be called a city.
that. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we are. So you went there, and I was looking forward to that. I was getting out all my chunkiest jumpers. Was it properly nippy? I
It
bet
was, yeah. So it was very cold actually on the last day when we left on Tuesday, which is sort of getting up and getting packed
Yeah, and
and
you were
having
like going,
breakfast.
"Brr."
And it was -8, -9.
Damn.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
When was it that you went?
It was this week.
Oh,
yeah,
this week,
so
okay.
it was very cold. on
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, right.
The Monday was, I suppose, -4, -5.
That was the day of actually going and seeing stuff. wasn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, obviously we weren't outdoors that much, and everything's very warm and well heated inside. And even when you're outside, it's like for some reason it's almost not as bad as here because it's very damp and wet here, isn't it?
Right.
So even though
Whereas
it's like
it's a cleaner,
4 or 5,
crisper,
it's clean.
cold.
It's not,
Yeah.
So Teresa actually said this when I was going. My colleague Teresa said, as long as the humidity's not bad, you probably won't feel it. And I always thought humidity is a word you associate with heat, but it's just moisture in the air.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's when it's dry cold, you don't. It
doesn't hit you in the lungs
doesn't hit
so
you in the
much.
same
Yeah.
way. So, I mean, I did have my super big coat on and gloves
Right.
and so.
I'd packed so much cold
Michael
shit.
Carroll,
I'd
who
gone
was
a bit
who's
mad.
from Mobile World Live, came without gloves or anything, and he was like, "Oh, it's worse than this. It's like this in Scotland."
He's Scottish,
so he was
isn't he?
kind of hardy.
Yeah, well,
and
Scottish people-
Gareth hit on the. I should, by the way, before we start, I should say thanks to Gareth. He's on the PR side at Nokia. And he does watch the podcast, I know, from time to time. And Steph, who's in marketing, he's quite new at Nokia because they're really, really good hosts and very hospitable. And
cool.
So yeah, thanks for sort of looking after me. But I think Gareth went without gloves even, and then he was sort of worried about like feeling it. But we were indoors most of the time. So
yeah, I was going to go the other way. I was going to really overcompensate. I was like packing long johns.
I overcompensated. I took that like gloves, I bought a hat, I had everything.
I was going to nick a hat off my son.
And then you're literally outdoors for like
2 seconds.
2 seconds, and you're in
so
a taxi.
you didn't go on an Ulu pub crawl?
Well, we went out. We got there flew on the Sunday. The hotel's called the Lapland Hotel. Really, really nice. But we basically just got the taxi from the airport to the hotel and stayed in the hotel that night and had a really nice hotel.
Did you have any reindeer?
Yeah, basically all I ate was reindeer while I was there. That's pretty much all I ate.
Would you recommend reindeer?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean,
I imagine it's like other game, like venison or something.
It's very
like
similar to venison, but the 2 meals I had were like really high quality. So one was at the hotel, which is a super nice hotel, really, really good food. And then Steph, who's a bit of a fan of single malts, was like, well, let's go and have a few single malts in the bar. So
nice.
And then the Monday we went out to
any jump out at you? Any single malts?
We had Lagavulin,
Finland doesn't
which I'd not had
whiskey.
before, but I do know it. I do know of it, but
what was that?
Lagavulin, which
rings a vague bell.
Yeah, because I've never been a fan of Lafroig.
You don't like the PT Islet.
Steph was like, if you drink a Lagavulin first, by the time you get around
breaks
to
you
Lafroig,
in.
and I was later on I was drinking the Lafroig, and maybe it's because I was completely pissed. I don't know, but it did taste better than I remember it tasting.
There's something about drinking like proper spirits when it's cold as well.
Yeah, didn't have any sort of finish. I mean, I had finished beers, but didn't have.
Do they have like an equivalent of Aquavit or something?
I mean, they have.
There's no actually. Oh no, they have
There's vodka there, and
they have vodka, obviously.
They
have this Kosken Korva. It's a very famous Finnish.
But it's not. We had some of that at the dinner actually, but the guy who was opposite me, who's actually the head of System on a Chip stuff, he's been in the company since the 80s. He's like, Veo Contas. He's
so
called.
Klaus was there.
He's he's like a sort of a bit of a guru in the kind of chip industry, and worked at Caltech. Like studied at Caltech when he was younger, and
he's proper chip dude.
Took charge of their SoC strategy under sort of Tommy Ito, but. He was like, I don't want to drink that. I want Calvados. So we all ended up ordering that instead.
By the way, reindeer is
I'm not
fantastic.
a fan of that, if I'm honest.
Reindeer is fantastic.
I was just saying, that's all we ate.
It's absolutely fantastic. And by the way, if you're ever in Helsinki, I don't know if you know, but there's a fantastic Russian restaurant there. And I don't know of many cities that actually have Russian restaurants.
Right.
They have one or two in Helsinki. Yeah. And one of them serves bear. At least they used to.
Bear.
Right.
I've had bear burgers.
I think I'll skip that one.
Tastes like normal meat.
Yeah, red meat, right?
So I'll go from eating Rudolph to eating Paddington. I'm feeling bad here. Okay, so that was all. That was good. I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure we will. We'll go and have a drink after. You can tell me a bit more about the trip. But why didn't you? You wrote an excellent long piece on it.
I'm getting tugged around.
Now
I'm really sort of out of place where I normally am.
No, you're good.
Pierre just.
I feel like I'm a long way away from you guys.
For people who don't watch this on video, we got an ongoing thing where Iain just seems to be a little bit more restless in the way he positions himself, and Pierre every now and then has to correct him when he's just fucked off out of frame or whatever.
He goes to the corner like, oh
yeah. So let's get back. So you wrote an excellent piece on light reading called "Nokia Offers Rare Glimpse of Its Northern Lights."
Yeah.
And the featured image is one of those mad anechoic chambers. That, as you say, not a medieval torture chamber, despite the appearance. Yes. So why don't you take it from the?
Yeah.
Tell us about Monday and what you learned.
So Ulu is basically it's where they do a lot of their wireless R&D, and they've been there for about 50. I think they did their first R&D project there 50 years ago. So it's obviously pre the whole kind of mobile era that we have now. But they have about 3,000 employees there. and at the moment 400 are involved. So apparently this is the only site in the whole kind of footprint where they do like R&D testing and production under the same roof.
Okay.
Which they kind of, I mean, you probably have to talk to a couple of their big rivals to kind of get a sense of how unique that is, but they kind of feel that that's quite unique in the industry to have that people tend to do them at different ones.
Well, we'll take their claim at face value.
And they do a lot of the massive MIMO stuff in Oulu. So it's like, and that's kind of what we were being shown. So there was stuff that's happening on the R&D side that we obviously didn't see. And I think part of that was some R&D is quite boring to journalists to look at. It would literally be looking at people at desks, I'm guessing, working on software.
Yeah, it's not like they've got bubbling cold rooms.
No, totally. Like you think R&D, you think it's going to be like mad chambers and like explosions going on. But I think some of it is people working on algorithms. So you don't want. What I'm thinking from their perspective, they're like, how do we show this off to journalists and get it like convey the kind of magnitude of
and
what
give
we
you some
do
photo opportunities.
So the best way for them to do that, I think, was to take us around this thing they called Ottava, which stands for over-the-air verification area, which is what the picture is. It's an anechoic chamber. So they have like these, they're kind of like foam grey spikes on the walls
What's
everywhere.
the purpose of those spikes?
Well, it's similar to, if you remember the last room we were in.
It's dampening.
It dampens the noise. I mean, it kills the wavelength goes like that as it goes into the spikes.
The wave,
so
basically.
It basically kills.
The wave doesn't come back. It doesn't react.
It doesn't.
So
it
sort
doesn't
of purifies
rebound.
the testing.
Yeah,
It doesn't rebound, so you don't get a kind of echo effect. Basically,
Correct.
you kill the echo. But you can hear it when you go in there. When you speak inside it,
There isn't the normal
there's
echo
no
that
kind
you
It
of
has an anechoic effect.
Yeah,
as well, right?
there's no like there's no acoustic at all. There's no none of that sort of church acoustics. It's like the
What does
opposite of the
anechoic
scale.
mean?
Anechoic chamber is a chamber very similar to this, usually designed for acoustics, means it deadens the sound.
So anechoic, the etymology is without echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
That is exactly right.
So when you go in, you hear your ears like ringing or something? Or?
You just hear like I mean,
Dead
it's not
silence.
It's a very
it's
odd
not dead silence. You speak, but there's no echo, there's no rebound at all.
So we won't even notice it, and it's partly muffled here by these walls. And you'll know this, but that's why we bother to have all that shit on the wall in the last place. But when you're in a normal room, you just account for a degree of echo. So it's the absence of it.
When you're in a church and you get some kind of, and then you get to the opposite extreme of that. It's like your voice just dies as soon as you've said something.
Exactly. It's a very odd experience, in fact.
It's quite flat. And
sounds like me when I'm trying to tell a joke.
Strange.
But you kindly laughed at that.
There's lots of them. So what they've done is they've taken shipping containers and basically like retrofitted them to support all of these, and they've had so many different kind of variations that they're able to test all these different types of radio they've got, from the kind of basic like 2T2R stuff, the like simple kind of relatively simple these days 4G equipment, right up to 64T, 64R, where you've got loads of antennas crammed into the units.
Massive MIMO and all that.
And it becomes incredibly complex. And then there's an area that we couldn't photograph, which is the sort of thing they're really proud of, called the 360-degree wall.
You're allowed to talk about it. They won't send.
I can talk about it, because I wrote about it in there, but we couldn't photograph it. But it's like, those are like square chambers that quite simple, relatively. Whereas this is like a circular room with lots of, it still has the spikes, but it's got lots of antennas everywhere. And what they're doing there is they're simulating things like a high-speed train. They can bounce the signal around the antennas and simulate what it would be like to have a high-speed train in motion. And they're doing this. They're using that for 6G research as well. So they're now pushing out to even having 256 TRX radio units.
What is
ultimately?
Let's not get into.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, that's a tangent I can't allow.
You can't allow.
Well, you say that. What is 6G? And this is the interesting thing: is like nobody's nailed down what 6G is yet. But if you're Nokia or Ericsson, you have to think about what.
No,
6G
of course you have to.
Because,
You have to.
because even though there isn't a standard yet,
absolutely,
what these guys are doing on the R&D side is what's going to kind of lead.
I totally
to
agree.
Were you just being a little bit mischievous on the pro Wi-Fi side?
I am, but we're also at the Wi-Fi industry is looking at Wi-Fi 8.
Well, quite.
Yeah, totally.
And you could argue that Wi-Fi's 2 better than cellular, couldn't you? Because they're on 7 right now.
That's right.
So it's 2 better.
That is right.
End of chat.
We're faster. We're cheaper. We're not.
And we're 2 better.
Yeah, 2 better.
Go on.
So we had a couple of guys taking us around this Ottawa facility, and it kind of finished with. So they have an outdoor testing area as well. That's 35 kilometres away, but it's huge. It's like this massive wooded area where they fly drones around, and they even send drivers up there to drive cars. And a lot of it's now
all
remote.
just to test vivo wireless.
If I had one main takeaway from this, by the way,
I was going to ask what you thought the point of
my main takeaway would be. So at the moment, obviously, there's all this government concern about are we too heavily reliant on a couple of big companies to do radio equipment, and do we need to get competition into the market? Do we need to get this is where Open RAN comes from. You go somewhere like that, and I think this is obviously the message they were trying to convey with it, is the scale of it is just quite immense. Like the amount of investment that's gone into Ottawa, and it's quite unique in a way to have an area where you can have this open area where there's not many people. There's a few moose wandering around every now and again.
Reindeer.
Yeah.
Those reindeer that you haven't shot for your dinner.
Yeah, totally. But apart from that, they have this area where they can just fly drones around uninterrupted. And they also have this ability to kind of tap into they had a young employee there who was a Bangladeshi girl who just joined, and she sort of said it's like the Silicon Valley of the North. But they do have Ulu University is very
pretty unlike Bangladesh as well.
Ulu University is very highly regarded unsurprisingly, they've got quite close links with Nokia,
yeah,
and they're very highly regarded on the wireless research side. You have a lot of other technology companies there as well that kind of work within the kind of Nokia ecosystem. So there is a kind of sense of that. It's obviously not on the scale of Silicon Valley, which is covering all things from chips to AI these days, but as a kind of wireless hotspot. And to try and replicate this for kind of companies that are coming into the market doing, radio network software or hardware units, I think would be incredibly hard. I mean, their message was, this is obviously what they were trying to get across on the PR side, I think, is that you can put advanced 5G units out there and everything, but unless you've gone through these kinds of verification tests, then
there's no shortcuts.
So all the fine-tuning of the algorithms and the stuff that's really important when you get to the kind of massive MIMO level comes out of things like Ottawa. So if you can't do that on that kind of scale, you're setting yourself up potentially for some kind of falling behind in the field, I guess, is what they're trying to...
Can I just comment on a couple of things here?
Yeah.
Okay, so by the way, Nokia, fantastic company. They really know what they're doing. Oulu has always been, also when I was there years ago, the headquarters for the radio development, and they do an incredible job. And as you said, they've got, 50 years of history.
Yeah.
And they're integrated with the university there, and they produce an incredible amount of capable people, and they're super, super skilled. What bugs me, and just on the political side, I don't know if you guys know this, but you might remember years ago in the run-up to 5G, this is where I don't like, and this is very political, this is where I don't like government and corporations getting in cahoots with each other. I generally do not like seeing that.
Yeah.
And here's how they did. At the time, we're talking about competition, right? There's more beer happening.
I know. I just came out with 2 beers. I realised one was bigger than the other.
I'm having such a good... Oh, you got one with an og. Beautiful.
Yeah, no, I just found a couple of Elvis juice, and I just realised that one of them was bigger than the other.
Elvis juice.
And I nicked the bigger one because I'm a selfish bastard.
No, that's good.
Anyway.
I just want to say, so this is political, but in the run-up to 5G, when the R&D was happening for 5G, Nokia, and I wrote about this, and I think it's outrageous. It really, I find it politically and personally outrageous. Nokia got cheap loans from the European Reconstruction Bank.
Right.
This is a bank whose mission is to support reconstruction after wars.
Yeah.
This is where they got cheap loans. And if they had not been Nokia, it had been somebody else, you try to get a loan from the European Reconstruction Bank. I find that just outrageous and unacceptable. And
to clarify, my understanding of what your political point is there is certain people are favoured when it comes to public money.
Who is it? I mean, it is not up to politicians to pick winners, right? Yeah. Or politicians to pick winners. And they do constantly and all the time. And if they continue to do that, we will have no competition of any kind.
And that's where you get things like lobbying and stuff as well.
But that's true, but we will have no competition of any kind because the winners have already been picked.
It's a lot less extreme, to be honest with you, with the Nokia side of things than it is with other companies.
Maybe, probably you're right.
You talk about the US Chips Act or how much money Taiwan's put behind its chip maker. And the EU's massive aggressively behind Open RAN, and let's try and find that's a grievance of Nokia and Ericsson, is that there's not been enough recognition of their role as European champions. I kind of sympathetic towards that in a way. I think they are kind of under-recognised to some extent.
No, so fair enough. And
I don't know what the size of
the degree. I don't remember either what it was, but
it isn't helping them at the moment anyway, because they're sacking 14,000 people.
No, exactly. So where did it take them? Hey, can we discuss that? So they got loans for 5G from the European Reconstruction Bank, which is, by the way, taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And now they're sacking 14,000 people. I mean, look, is this a good use of... I mean, you can get into these discussions, but I think, again...
because the last segment, you're going to really be able to flag your libertarian flag.
But look, I'm not against Nokia in any way. I used to be a Nokia person. I think it's a fantastic
you're
company.
You're talking about the EU.
I'm talking about the politics of it. And if they want to be absolutely sure there's no competition of any kind, they just have to continue that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because then there won't be.
And
it's always the backlash. It's always the unintended consequences that are what destroys the fabric of competition, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
that's really what happens.
The other thing we saw that I should mention.
Yeah, let's.
Go
ahead.
No, it's good.
Just in the interest of time, if you can wrap up your review of that trip in this.
I'll wrap it up, because the other thing we got taken around was the actual factory area itself. So they've got the R&D facility, they've got the factory, which doesn't do a lot of scale production, but the idea is it does the early stage products based on what the R&D guys are doing, and then they can sort of feed back quite quickly early signs of problems, glitches, and then it gets dealt with before it gets pushed out to facilities that do it at scale. But they do a bit of like mass production for some European markets, they were saying. But I think they've got, so of the 3,000 employees, they've got 400 of them at the factory, and we got taken around that. That was almost, there's a picture there of the anechoic chamber, but the factory was almost more fun in a way, because you've got...
Right, is that with the robot arms?
Yeah, it's heavily automated.
Yeah.
So you've got...
robot arms that look one step away from trying to perform surgery on me.
You couldn't take photos. We were sort of forbidden from taking photos around a lot of it, but there's like weird things moving around. There's like robots taking things up and down.
Yeah, it's proper high tech.
And it's all based on a private... So all the things that we get told about and talk about, like private networks, AI being used, is all kind of on display at that production area, and they're moving out of it. So this is the kind of newsy bit, is that they have this big construction underway,
which you got a photo of as well.
That was freezing when we were there, because they took us up to the top of it, and it was windy, and it was. It's just a shell. It's like it's obviously in development, but the idea is
to campus due to open in 2025.
Yeah, they're moving about 1,500 people there, so they're keeping the. I have to do that. You said that before. They've got like 1,500 people going there, and they're shutting down some of the R&D facility to move them there, but they're keeping Ottawa, because they've obviously put a lot of effort into doing those chambers, and they're keeping...
Well, it's good to see investment in keeping it going for the next few decades.
Yeah,
you don't build a whole great new thing unless you're expecting to stay
the
in it for a
context
while.
Obviously is quite difficult, because I'll wrap it up now, but the context is a few weeks ago, obviously this announcement, it's a really bad time for the industry at the moment. It's not unique to Nokia, Ericsson's cutting 8,500 jobs.
Yeah, we covered this in recent pods.
Between 8 and 14. So there's not the spending's like really taken a sort of nosedive this year, especially in North America, which is where they make a lot of their profits. So it's kind of difficult times for them. So I think it's really nice they did the trip. And it's nice to be with people that seem quite sort of passionate about the company.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll read your own words back to you, because I think you summed up your article, which I'd encourage everyone to read.
It's a good one.
On light reading about this. Mm-hmm. And you say the overriding impression is of a team passionate and enthusiastic about its role. Employees proudly refer to themselves as Nokians, and it's easy to agree with them after just a day among the brainiacs of Oulu. Or Ulu.
Is it Oulu?
Oulu.
Okay.
Oulu.
I think.
I'll defer to you. You used to work there. That mobile tech is increasingly undervalued as a commodity. Whatever one's view of the market dynamics, that label does not obviously suit a thing so extraordinarily complex. And that's good. That sounds like a really good summmery. And it sounds like they did a good job.
I think I was too nice to them, because they've got to put that all over their social media channels. But yeah.
But there's a lot of...
You did put a disclaimer, but
yeah, I did.
Like reading a bit more disciplined than Telecoms.com about disclaimers. You go, disclaimer, the trip to Olu. I keep forgetting them. Maybe tell me.
Yeah.
Olu, that formed the basis of the story was funded by Nokia, which obviously we've covered.
Right,
Sorry,
okay.
what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, there's a lot of pride working for Nokia still. And there used to be a huge amount of pride. I'm happy to see that it's still there because I think that really drives
Well, they've
them.
had a lot of missteps. I mean, I used to be a smartphone analyst, and I covered the time when that all went Pete Tong.
Yes.
Not necessarily through any fault of their own. I mean, the iOS Android thing was just a disruptive force.
They had the first smartphone, remember that, right?
Yeah,
they had the
Symbian stuff.
communicator with the Symbian and all of that, and they had that market
But that's
completely
the point.
cornered. Completely.
But that's the point, that iOS and Android was much better than Symbian.
Yes.
And it was just a disruptive thing. Yeah, maybe they had a Polaroid or Kodak moment where they could have bought Android instead of Google. Fuck knows.
Well, the piece I put up today, which isn't that one, was about their missteps.
Yeah.
I see.
Not those missteps, the ones in
the more
2019.
the FPGA.
Very much based on the chat that we had with Veo.
But it's really great that there's so much pride there because it really drives performance. That people are super proud and they're super happy to be.
Well, and for Finland, it's a massive
it's a huge
source of pride.
thing. It's a huge thing. It's a national pride sort of thing. No question about it.
Just like Ericsson or IKEA or Saab or what's
maybe
the
Ericsson
Saab?
less so.
Saab, yeah.
Saab.
Also, they're Chinese now, aren't they?
Anyway, there's a few Swedish national champions. Anyway, what's
Finish a little bit
or
more-
Lego in Denmark?
Lego in Denmark. We're big in we're big into like. No, but I think my sense is the Finns are somewhat more nationalistic and more proud of their thing because maybe I don't know. Maybe they don't.
Well, they've been menaced by Russia a few times. They probably a little bit.
Also that, and the Swedes are typically much more low key and modest.
So the border with Russia, I didn't realise is as long as it is. It's 850 miles. That
massive.
Border. The other thing is that they are literally. It's not. It's a cliche to say it, but they are obsessed with saunas. So the top floor of that building you're looking at. When they were being led up there, the woman was like, "Do you know what's going to be on the top floor?" And we all went. The British journalist went, "A bar," and she's like, "No, a sauna."
Every Nokia.
There's a sauna on the top level.
I mean, I like the thought of a bar and a sauna.
They take beers into the sauna.
Yeah, they do that. They do that.
That'd be so bad for you. Like
Would it?
Alcohol and then the heat.
You just dehydrate so quickly.
People do it.
They pour a bottle of vodka on the actual hot rocks. That's
There
what
we are.
sometimes they would do that. But
Get
when I
pissed
was
off
there,
the steam. I like that. I want to do that.
Exactly. That's what they did. And also, when I was there, the legend was, and I never checked, but the legend was that every major Nokia building had a sauna.
Yeah.
I don't know if
They
it's true.
do like a sauna. I was slightly. Well, I heard stories about press trips with Nokia in the past where they make people jump into frozen lakes and then get into a sauna. And from a bloke's point of view, I was particularly worried about that because after you've come out of a frozen lake, you're not looking your best, are you? Yeah, exactly.
Yes. You have to do it naked.
Well, but that's what you do.
No, but you do actually because it doesn't work very well with clothes on. It's much worse, in fact. This is what I don't.
Right. Well, at least you can shake off the cold water a bit quicker if you haven't got swimming trunks.
Yeah.
Correct. Something.
I'd be willing to pay that price to not expose.
I need to have that certain area covered. I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not finished enough for that shit. Okay, okay. Let's move on. Let's move on to the US.
Yes.
So I've got 3 stories I've written. 2 I've written. The last 2 I've written today and yesterday, and one was a few weeks ago. But it's noteworthy because it's.
How many stories do you do a day, by the way?
Me personally, typically only about 1 a day, but I used to write more, but.
He's got loads of other shit to do.
Yeah, because I'm the editor. I just get a few other little bits and bobs. We publish somewhere between 5 and 6, depending on how productive everyone's being.
A day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I personally typically only write 1 a day.
Oh.
I might have said this.
By the way?
Yeah, go ahead.
Bicheno, is that a?
It's English.
It's English.
I know.
It sounds Italian.
It seems Italian, doesn't it? No, if there's a village in Cambridgeshire called Over, as opposed to Under.
Oh, okay.
And if you go to the graveyard.
Over.
Oh, you know
My
Over?
friends is from Over.
No way. Well, get the graveyard there and you will see my surname on gravestones going back about 200 years.
No way.
There's another way of remembering my dad as well.
All right.
So yeah, it's English.
Oh, okay. Very good.
And even more confusing is my middle name's Diego because I was born in Chile.
Oh, that is very. Oh, you were born in Chile.
Yeah.
I spent a year in Chile and something.
Right, well, it's a cool place.
It's a
but then you look
fantastic
at me and, like,
You don't
for
look
example, when
Chilean.
I was coming back through the airport, I was with Iain, coming back through Copenhagen airport, and people were talking to me in Danish the whole time.
Ah, right.
Because I'm taller and fair-haired.
Completely
The
Scandinavian.
woman at the one at the airport. This is a good anecdote. I have to tell it. She went, "Oh, you look like you could be you could be Danish. And he went, well, the family's like the background sort of East Anglia. So, there was a lot of
Vikings.
there was a lot of Vikings there,
Obviously.
like raping and pillaging. And she was like, oh, yeah, sorry, maybe we shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
No, she said.
Because I joked about it. I was going, I'm probably the product of a pillage.
And she looked really embarrassed.
No.
It's like, don't worry about it, it's 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't a recent
Everybody's
pillage.
got over about it.
Yes.
It wasn't the one that we're still chatting about.
No.
Once the two Ronnies do sketches going on about raping and pillaging, and
Right. Well, that's pretty mainstream then, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, it's not hard to imagine that I've got some Scandi genes.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
I would think so.
Anyway, how did we get onto that? Oh, yeah. Yes. So 3 stories. The oldest one, the only reason I'm going to mention it is because one of our most read stories of the year, because I think it touched
Class
on
action suit. It
touched on some stuff.
That's one of the most read of the year?
It is.
Wow.
Sometimes they go viral. Often you won't get that many stories because they'll just be worthy industry stories, and a few people like you maybe will read them.
Yes.
But when they go viral, it's normally read by non-telecoms people.
Oh, right.
And
yes.
And you're probably aware, I know you spent a lot of your life in North America. You're probably aware.
Most read stories.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah. So the headline says, T-Mobile US faces class action suit from AT&T and Verizon subscribers.
Just a few days ago, that?
No, this is from about a week and a half ago, but we didn't do a pod last week, so I've decided it's still relevant. And because it got lots of reads and it reflects well on me.
What did they do?
And it was actually journalism. It was actually journalism off Reuters. That's the other thing. It wasn't even any original reporting. I was just re-reporting something Reuters did. Anyway, I'm gonna touch on this one the most fleetingly because it's the least recent and I think the least interesting in terms of what we can argue the toss about. But I'll touch on it because it's US. So some enterprising lawyer has decided to file a class action suit against T-Mobile on behalf of pretty much all AT&T Verizon subscribers on the back of the T-Mobile Sprint merger.
Right.
So these AT&T and Verizon subscribers have apparently seen their bills go up since that happened, and through a process of, I think, fairly fucking tenuous reverse engineering, they've gone, well, that must be because of that merger that you let happen. Therefore, we're going to sue the merger, in effect. Anyway, and I think the reason it did so well, you can tell something's done well because it's got loads of comments on it.
Right.
And most of them are from US kind of libertarian types who are like, this is bullshit, this is the most speculative stuff.
So what are they suing again exactly?
They're basically suing the merger, but they're suing T-Mobile. And the interesting thing about it, I will read...
based on that, it was...
on their prices going up.
Yeah. Well, let me read it. Because their bills have gone up. And their argument is their bills wouldn't have gone up if the merger hadn't happened because there's a reduction in competition.
That's the point.
Anyway, quite. So here we are. Let me read some of my stuff that I wrote. I said, on one level, the assertion the merger reduced competition is undeniable, since it reduced the number of US national mobile operators from 4 to 3. The plaintiffs may even be able to prove that their phone bills have gone up since the 2020 merger. What will be much more difficult is proving causation rather than correlation between the two events. Furthermore, the effect on competition was the focus of very lengthy deliberation by the powers that be before they allowed the deal to go through. As is often the case, conditions were attached, including a leg up for a new national MNO dish. So if anyone, surely the regulatory authorities, let me just quickly finish reading this. The regulatory authorities should be the target of a case like this rather than T-Mobile US. And this is the last paragraph I'm going to read. But it will presumably be much easier to extract compensatory payments from T-Mobile US than a government agency. The bid to reverse the mega merger seems especially far-fetched because that's what they're trying to do. Their ultimate negotiating point is that you should undo the merger. And I'll say this and then I'll shut up.
That's absurd.
The bid to reverse the mega merger seems especially far-fetched and is presumably an extreme negotiating position from which the plaintiffs expect to retreat in favour of a nice big payday. You both have got. You go first.
Well, I was just going to say that they lied about not the prices going up. That's just stupid. But they lied about the merger. So
in what sense?
In terms of employees, they made big claims.
Oh yeah.
We've been all over this. That the two companies after merging would employ more people than the standalone players put together. which sounds like a very strange thing to say.
It's a very strange
normally
thing.
happens with M&A.
Because normally the
It
point
never
of
happens
M&A,
with M&A.
why do you need two core
No,
network
of course,
managers?
of
Why do you
course,
need
of
two
course,
shops
of course.
next to each other?
Doesn't make any sense.
And of course, the number of
we knew they were lying essentially, right?
But that's what they said, and that's what they said to the FCC or the regulators when they pushed it through. Now, since then, their numbers have gone down by several thousand, and they're now planning on cutting more jobs.
Yes,
and they've come out to defend that statement. They've said what we really meant was that in some point in the future, 2030, if we hadn't merged, the two companies would have employed fewer people, which is basically like, so you could just invent a number then, couldn't you?
Yeah.
So, but that to me is a way to go after them because they deliberately, they lied to.
They lied.
I'd say that's a
lied
much
to the
better way to go at them
authorities.
than this.
That's
law.
just silly.
Yeah.
So, Claus, you were trying to speak when I was going off on reading my own shit.
Well, the thought that comes into my mind is that this whole antitrust thing in the U.S. is dead as far as I can tell. I mean, if antitrust was really a thing in America, they would break up some of those gigantic companies that have just monopolized the market. So I think they have a point in some way, right? To prove it is impossible. But I think the larger problem is these gigantic companies that have monopolized everything.
Yeah.
From a libertarian point of view.
From a libertarian point of view, which I share with you, Claus, and I'm with you. From the supposed right, the Republicans, the people who are supposed to be more small government, free market, you get all this worthy talk, but when the situation suits them, they're still crony capitalists.
They are.
And they'll still let things happen. Okay, look, I'm going to move that one on just because I've got two others and we've got like 20 minutes max left. So the other more recent one I wrote this week was, here we are, headlined, FCC creates highly politicised rules. So the broad theme of this segment is US political involvement in the telecom sector.
Right.
And the latter two, especially broadband as opposed to mobile. FCC creates highly politicised rules aimed at tackling, quote, digital discrimination.
God.
So... And
He's
so,
going to have a go at me in a minute. But.
Yeah, he just scooted over to see what I wrote, even though I just read it out to him. But you obviously don't believe me. You don't believe my lying mouth. So to distill this down, there's some new rules that FCC is empowered to enforce that are designed to get rid of this digital discrimination. And this discrimination is actually, I'll read it out because I've got it here. This is from the actual rule book. The rules define digital discrimination of access as policies or practices not justified by genuine issues of technical or economic feasibility that, one, differentially impact... part of this is that legalese bullshit that's hard to get your mouth around. Differentially impact consumers' access to broadband internet access service based on their income level, race, ethnicity, colour, religion, or national origin. Or two,
Oh, goodness me.
yeah, indeed. So it's getting into identity politics. Or two, are intended to have such a differential impact. So there's two things. Well, there's two main things. So obviously we're saying this is designed to protect protected classes along the lines of ethnicity or whatever.
Oh, gosh.
And then they're going differentially impact or are intended to have such a differential impact. And so, as I said in my second paragraph of this, as with so many top-down social engineering initiatives, the superficial aims are laudable, i.e. equality of whatever.
Well, I don't even agree with it that far.
Okay, fair enough. Let me finish this and you can push back. I mean, this is me trying to be balanced as well.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And that you should always be balanced. So
yeah,
full
because I know
marks
I could be, because I hate
Full
journalists.
marks to
I hate
you.
journalists who are too
opinionated, and they
activist-y.
shouldn't be. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Scott, full marks to you.
But
as a
many,
journalist.
but then I've got a but.
Okay.
But many questions remain about its execution and possible unintended consequences. The most obvious question whenever, quote, discrimination, close quote, is the matter at hand, is how to determine such a thing has happened. Discrimination is rarely stated or overt, so identifying it often relies on reverse engineering a disliked outcome and concluding it took place as the result of explicit design. And that little bit of the rule that I just read seems to point to that.
Right.
Go ahead.
Can I just say two things? First of all, by the way, about balanced journalism, one of the most important concepts in journalism that has, as far as I can tell, nearly, except for you, Scott, because you're trying to do it.
And Iain.
Yeah, and Iain. yeah. Trying to do it. And it's sometimes hard to do, but you have to make an attempt because it has been largely abandoned. I remember when I was at London School of Journalism, if you did not represent both sides of an argument, of a case, you would lose marks, and it would be accepted as a piece of
even if you got to force your own prejudices, you got to force yourself. Look, there's a simple term that people use. They call it steel manning, which is the opposite of straw manning. So straw manning is a rhetorical fallacy where you misrepresent an argument.
Yes.
Steel manning is trying to represent your opponent's argument in its best possible way and only attacking that.
Yes. So these things are incredibly important. And I don't think, generally speaking, the media totally understands. You do, and a few people probably do. Very conscientious people do. But it's so incredibly important that you represent both sides, or make a really concerted effort.
Otherwise, you're just being an activist.
Then you're just an activist, and that is entirely useless as far as information is concerned. And
I agree.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that first of all.
Sure.
The second thing I wanted to say is Milton Friedman, I'm a big Milton Friedman, he said there's a huge difference between equality of opportunity and equality of result.
Happy to hear you say that. Yeah.
Equality of opportunity means the playing field is level in principle, right? It's level. And it should be level for whomever you are. Doesn't matter, right? The other is manufacturing a result to be equal. And what we know, and this gets into this, because that's what they're trying to do.
Totally.
They're trying to manufacture an equal result. And everybody on the left tries to do that. And whenever they do it, whether it be in the US or anywhere else, the backlash, the unintended consequences are much, much, much worse than just letting the field be level. And we know this. I mean, Milton Friedman as one, and there's others as well, he spent his entire life documenting these. There's a guy, by the way, by the name of Thomas Sowell. He's fantastic. He's an economist. You know him, right?
Oh, yeah, I know him well.
He spent his entire life documenting these things. He's a Black American, and he's documented this forever, saying all of these reverse discrimination or affirmative action, they all have negative consequences that are much worse than if they were not there in the first place. Yeah. And we know this for a fact. This is documented stuff, and they still do it.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest disasters of our modern times, and it has been going on. It's getting worse because they're trying to manufacture equality, and you can't do it.
Well, quite, and
it's also wrong to do it. First of all, ethically wrong, in my opinion.
Well, and it's almost like you read what I wrote, because I'm going to read another paragraph of what I wrote. Partly deriving, I won't read the quotes. I put quotes from all 5 FCC commissioners.
Okay, good.
And as often the case with the FCC, you've got the 3 who are on the side of the ruling party, and the 2 who are on the side of the opposition, and you get, obviously, the dissent comes from the others.
Yes,
it's very partisan.
Yes.
But we're going to come to a thing in a bit which is bizarrely unpartisan, which is the final segment, the final bit of this segment. One of the dissenting commissioners pointed to equity. What does he say? It's there somewhere. Fuck it. I'm going to get to my paragraph that draws on that. Mm-hmm. So this is me reading my own words. The dissenting positions draw on the eternal political schism between equality of opportunity and equality.
Oh, you said exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
You were reading my mind.
Amazing.
The latter often referred to as, quote, equity in the US. That's the so then I say these new rules seem to seek equality of outcome.
Yes,
and the concern is their enforcement will take insufficient account of the numerous factors, many completely innocent and coincidental, that may lead to a perceived unequal outcome. They also seem to give the FCC absolute power of enforcement.
We are so aligned. It's actually amazing. I suppose I just
you're basically the same person.
We are.
It's strange to see you in the room at the same time.
No, that's amazing, Scott. I didn't realize we were so aligned.
No, and I got that when you started speaking before we started recording, and straight away reading my mind. Yes, even though we've never met in person before.
No, we haven't. No.
Scott, do you do Wi-Fi lobbying on the side?
I might, yeah.
Sort of split yourself into 2.
Might have to.
Spectral.
Well, do you know what? I mean, there is. I can see where being into Wi-Fi fits in. So, if you don't mind me saying, Claus, you were talking about getting a bit more libertarian during the lockdown because you were struck by how
unfree everything,
how unfree and how concentrated power was.
Yes, and
libertarian. I mean, there'll be lots of sort of deep discussions and explorations into what being libertarian is, but ultimately it's about how I describe it. And I tell you what, you might enjoy my book. I can plug my book.
Oh, good.
Oh yeah, because there's a lot of that. I mean, you can second that.
What's your book?
There's a lot of. It's called Identity Crisis.
Okay.
I'll send
Has nothing to do with telecoms, or?
No.
Well, no, but I do.
Telecoms.
One of the concepts I explore in it is top down versus bottom up.
Oh, good.
Which I think is central to all this. And those of us who are libertarian are basically bottom up. We think, let people decide.
Yes.
You need to have some kind of government, but let them have as light a hand as possible and let things evolve as organically as possible. Whereas people who are top down are believers in central planning and much stricter.
Exactly. And not only that, they're well,
Is that Wi-Fi in the book?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Wi-Fi's the bottom up. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. No question about it.
There's maybe a metaphor for Wi-Fi.
Well, this is why I just got into that.
There are many parallels there, but yeah. So the issue is that a lot of folks today, because they're very left-leaning, want to decide what's good for all of us without actually...
Because their heart's in the right place.
Exactly. But they also think that we need to be controlled.
Yeah, because our heart isn't in the
we're
right place.
incapable of controlling ourselves. But why are they not able to control themselves? Or how are they able to control themselves?
They were lucky enough to be born enlightened, and you're just a fucking idiot.
That's basically...
I mean, it's not your fault, mate. You're just not as enlightened as them.
I'm happy that you said that, because that's kind of the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
I feel.
Okay.
We have that, by the way, I think that's everywhere now, but we have that in the extreme in Denmark, and there's not much opposition to it. And unfortunately, I think in the US, they now have it a lot as well. In the UK as well, I guess.
Well, it's just a schism. It's a massive ideological schism.
Very polarised these days.
Extremely.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Yes.
I mean,
and this next issue that you're coming on to is another example.
Yeah. Well, so I'll come on to that. But just to finish off, one of the reasons I am more like you, Klaus, is actually just philosophical. I just think it comes down to power. Who has authority over anyone else? Do I get to tell you to take that bowler hat off?
No, exactly.
And with what authority?
Leave
would I
people
do
alone. Is my thing. If they want to do that, let them do that.
Yeah.
Right?
But with what philosophical authority?
Exactly, with what authority?
Can I impose my will on you?
None whatsoever.
That's ultimately what underpins all my shit.
I totally agree.
Anyway, so the final thing is what I just wrote today before we came out. And the headline is, US moves to make big tech contribute to broadband network costs. And I was really surprised by this. So this overlaps heavily with the fair contribution thing that we've chatted to a bit.
Started on this
and so the yeah, I know. Well, this is what was so fun about it. I knew all this stuff would provoke the fuck out of you. Yeah. So my opening paragraph was, a new bipartisan bill seeks to empower US... Oh, shit. There's a massive typo there. It's supposed to say comms.
Don't you hate when you notice those after the fact and it's gone out to everybody?
That's the one word we're not supposed to say.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my.
He's not even paying attention.
I know.
Yes,
he just said the C word.
He's looking at the football scores.
And, oh, hello. I've just refreshed it and Andrew caught it in the edit.
Look at that.
I said, I meant to write comms.
Edited it.
Well, no, this would have been a few hours ago. I just haven't refreshed it. I meant to say comms, but what I just read was comes, COMES. I know. That's
gosh.
And Andrew caught it in the edit, so thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, it did.
Anyway, so let me read that again.
That's porn material, that is.
Yes. No, actually, that would have been CUMS.
Well, your ratings are going up all the time.
Anyways, just get your filthy mind out of my otherwise spotless podcast. That's twice you've said a bad C word. So a new partisan bill. Yeah, it's the last bit.
People are finishing their runs at this stage, taking their headphones off.
Only the diehards. Only Richard Fogg's sitting there going, "Oh my god."
On his 100-mile run.
He's on mile 50 at this stage. A new bipartisan bill seeks to empower US comms regulator to require contributions from content providers to the Universal Service Fund. And one thing I'll just say, as with a lot of legalese stuff, especially in the States, they like to use euphemisms. So rather than call them, say, big tech or whatever, they call them edge providers.
Edge providers? What a load of shit. Where did you get that from?
And anyway...
Edge is a very popular word these days.
Yeah.
It is. I still don't understand it completely why, because they use it in many different ways.
But they're saying edge...
It's like cloud.
Telcos are edge providers.
You what?
Telcos are edge providers.
Well, shall I list what in this bill edge providers are? Because it's fucking 10 bullet points, but I'll do them quickly.
Edge providers is what they want.
Let me list them really quickly. So, the term edge provider means a provider of online content or services, including a digital advertising service, a search engine, a social media platform, a streaming service, an app store. Yeah, well, this is what they say, mate. Don't heckle me. Don't shoot the messenger. A cloud computing service, an over-the-top messaging service, or any other service that enables texting. It's ridiculous.
Anything we say, you have to pay for.
What exactly? So I won't even finish.
That's right.
And so what they're basically saying, and I'll shut up after this because I wrote a lot more and put in a lot of quotes, but they seem to be saying, oh yeah, I'm going to say one more thing actually because I've got to have a nod to our Danish colleague Strandy. They seem to be basically arguing in favour of fair contribution. This is in the context of rural. So the way they framed it is that rural shit needs some help.
It's a little bit different, isn't it? It's more like
it's a little bit more constrained.
It's not saying you should contribute to the cost of network traffic. It's saying you should help build networks in underserved areas.
But I think the underlying rationale is very similar.
It's the same
anyway,
philosophy.
Strandy, according to this Strand Consult thing, which credit where it's due, I didn't know about this until I read that it got into my inbox. I just extracted some quotes from him. I'll do the final paragraph I extracted. So this is a quote from the Strand Consult research note. The market-based pace... This is what happens at the end. I shouldn't be reading quotes at the end of the fucking podcast.
You've done a few.
No, I'm into an Elvis juice.
You've done a few of them on Elvis juice. So
I know.
It's not worked out.
Can we have a break to go to the thing?
We'll be done in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Are you all right? Are you struggling a bit?
I'm struggling a little bit, but I'll be fine. I think 10 minutes.
Yeah. Don't worry. We'll be fighting each other to get to the bog.
Yeah. Exactly.
Quote, the market-based principle behind the bill is, this is normal for us.
Oh, okay, good.
Is that the largest users of broadband networks and those that are the primary financial beneficiaries of the internet should help pay for broadband networks. This is all the Strand Consult quote, research note quote. Small broadband owners and operators have no market power to demand a good faith negotiation for cost recovery with large tech enterprises.
Cost recovery. This is John's lobbying and research.
Yeah, this is.
I think
it could be. Well, in fact, I didn't put it in the story, but at the end of his research note, he goes, "We're proud to have been contributors to all this shit."
Right.
Anyway, this reform is long overdue because large entities do not participate meaningfully in the USF, which is the Universal Service Fund or whatever, and indeed engage in efforts to deter needed reform. And let me just say my rebuttal to that I wrote. While we defer to Strand Consult's expertise on the matter of the difficulties faced by the USF, we don't follow the logic that it falls on perceived beneficiaries of the internet to solve this problem. The US government repeatedly demonstrates that it can access apparently limitless funds for other strategic projects. And in this case, the, quote, market-based principle, close quote, seems to simply be a new tax. I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, so first of all, a government should never get involved in that. And that is my basic position, because what always happens is that the unforeseen circumstances are disastrous. And unforeseen means literally unforeseen. We can probably work out a number of circumstances that would happen following that would be unforeseen. But there's also tons of them that we can't work out.
Chaos theory of predicting the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's the other thing. And I'd like to quote Milton Friedman again.
Please do.
Can I do that? The free market capitalism, and capitalism has such a bad ring to it, but actually, free market capitalism.
Just free market.
Yes, is a profit and loss system. In order for it to work, those companies that cannot make it work must be allowed to die.
Yeah.
This is why there's never such a thing as too big to fail. They have to be allowed to die. If they're upheld by public funds and taxpayer money and whatever else that they can come up with, this will invite destruction in the long term. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I agree.
It will destroy value. It will destroy value in unforeseen ways. Some of them, as I said, we can work out. Many of them we cannot. But it's because it short circuits a fundamentally sound profit and loss system that has brought, honestly, us to where we are today.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
What was the whole Cold War of the latter half of the 20th century about, if not that?
Exactly.
No, I just think it's ridiculous. It's like saying farmers who sell produce to a supermarket should contribute to the cost of the supermarket because they make use of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You know, it's like saying BMW should pay for roads because their cars get used on roads. You know, it's people are in different parts of the value chain, and the guys who own this stuff and make money from their subscribers are the people who build the networks. Yeah. If they want to go down this road, what they'll possibly provoke is companies, the big tech providers, potentially being owners of networks. Because if you want them to pay for the cost of it, why shouldn't they have an ownership stake?
Why shouldn't they have a piece of the action?
And then that diminishes the role of the telcos that they're supposedly trying to protect anyway.
But not only that, nobody forced them to spend all that money on whatever it is they're spending.
Exactly.
Well, there we are. And look, we're all bursting now, so I might wrap it up here. I'm going to get to my final paragraph for my bit that I wrote, and if it's all right with you two, I'll just wrap it up.
No, do that.
I said my final paragraph after what I just read before. I said it also remains disputed how much direct cost on network companies could be attributed to content providers. Surely the capex associated with rolling out fixed networks is flat and unaffected.
Well, it's according to Ofcom.
Yeah, and unaffected. I wrote 2, but I should have written by subsequent traffic volume.
That's what Ofcom said in a report 2 weeks ago on the access network side.
There we are. Yeah. So that's the point. Anyway, look, let's wrap it up there. That
Scott,
was
can I just say, it's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed it.
It's good fun.
It was so much fun, and I'm so happy to meet somebody who also is a libertarian
let's
brother.
Keep chatting about this stuff.
A lunatic.
Also that,
fellow
which I am myself as well. So everything is perfect.
Your
Thank you so
doppelganger.
much.
All right, mate.
Take care, man.
Great to meet you in person at long last. Okay, so that's that. Our next one's going to be quite soon because we're having to record it earlier next week. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and make sure you join us for the next one.
Thanks, Iain.